Good morning. We'll be starting in a few minutes. Is this okay? Can people in the back hear or not? Yes? Whether you want to or not, right? Welcome. Make sure you get some breakfast. Restrooms are right out in the hallway if you haven't found them yet. Is everyone, I'm going to move forward, you guys can't even see me. Has everyone been able to log in to Wi-Fi through the public portal section? Is anyone having problems with that in any way? I want to thank you. It's a full crowd this morning. It's great to see you all. I can't remember a time when a summer was as nice as this one in a long time. I was cursing last summer when I was at camp and it was raining like every day last summer. Anyone remember that, or was that just me? Yeah. And then you remember winter. Yeah. So I'm saying that this was the payback for us going through that rainy summer and winter last year. So I want to thank Capital Area Technical Center for hosting us today and providing the food and a place for us to meet. They have been great to deal with. I want to thank Northeast Bank for being our sponsor this morning. They will come up in a few minutes and talk about what they do. And Joanne gave me half an hour. Holy cow. Oh, she isn't in here, is she? Okay. It does seem excessive, doesn't it? You guys don't want to hear me talk for half an hour. Oh, you are in the back. Oh, darn. I thought you were still in the hallway. No, that's okay. You're fine. I do want to introduce board members that are here. I know that some are not. I know that Kelly Wentworth is actually in New Hampshire at Tri-State today because we have a Tri-State meeting that we needed representation at the site for next year. Can I start selling Tri-State now?
Yeah.
May next year. Put it on your calendars. Whitefield, New Hampshire. If you have not been there, it is a beautiful site. They host us from soup to nuts because there's nothing else around there except mountains. And it is a beautiful facility. So really think about that. Sherry Moody, you want to raise your hand? Sherry is Vice President. Sherry Proctor, I didn't see Sherry. Dawn Pooler, can you raise your hand? I know you're here. Secretary. Myself as President. Other board members, so that you know, are Sybil Brewer. Sybil is from Region 10 Technology. Kelly is not here. Kelly is from RSU 5. Mark Bouchard, I saw you, RSU 39. Cheryl, I did not see Cheryl. Is Cheryl here? Cheryl is from Sanford. And Zach, I know, is here, and Zach is from Yarmouth. I do want to take a moment in all seriousness. We've had the pleasure of having Joanne with us for a year now, and I cannot say enough of what a change in our organization has occurred in a year because of Joanne. I'm going to ask you some things at the end of my talk this morning about where we go and how we're doing, and giving you an opportunity to tell us what we're not doing well. But I personally want to thank Joanne on behalf of the board in all sincerity. She has done yeoman's work, from doing clerical secretarial work to meeting with legislators, meeting with DOE, and really being an advocate for every one of us in this room and in our state. She has done work over and above and beyond, and I know she has, and she hasn't said it to me, of what she's getting paid, and I have no doubt of that. And so I just want to take a moment to express our gratitude to you and give applause to you for everything you've done. Having said that, Joanne teases me a lot, so.
It's not teasing.
Can we just go around the room quickly and have everyone introduce themselves, where you're from, what your school district coverage is, so that we know who you are and where you're from. We'll start over here.
Hi, I'm Heidi Cisco. I'm from AOS 43. We oversee MSAD 31, which is the Howland area, and MSAD 41, which is Milo area.
Jamie Youngblood from Herman School Department.
Gretchen Gardner from Brewer.
Leah Callback, RSU 10.
Barbara Durr from the China Savings Bank.
Shelley Cummings, Oxford Hills Technical School.
Jennifer Fluer, MSAD 58, Phillips, Kingfield, Rangeley, no, not Rangeley, Phillips, Kingfield, Avon, and Strong. I was gonna say around Rangeley, but.
Allison Gamache, RSU 9, Mount Blue Regional School District, the 10 towns surrounding Farmington.
Jody Harmon, RSU 9.
Bill Grant, Lewiston Public Schools.
Adam Hansen, Lewiston.
Denise Van Campen, RSU 60.
Zach Harding, Army School Department.
Kim Oliver, I'm actually from Harris School Solutions.
Carla Oliver, Harris, Upton.
Carl Miller, Augusta.
Joy Maynard, Walden County, Texas.
Terry Colley, Oxford School District, MSAD 17.
Amy Gann, Maine Indian Education.
Sybil Brewer, Region 10. Amanda Morris, RSU 12.
Michelle Grant, RSU 12. We're Willow, Chelsea, Windsor, Whitefield, Somerville, Alna, and Westboro.
You win the prize for the day on that one.
Write it down.
I thought 6 was a lot for me, but you took it.
Holly Floyd, RSU 12.
Wendy Bradstreet, RSU 29.
Rhonda Casey, Illinois.
Carol Leto, Grafton, Maine.
Don Fuller, MSAD 6, which is Buxton, Hollish, Standish, Livingston, and Bryan Island.
Mandy Fitzgerald, RSU 38, which is Manchester, Mount Vernon, Greenfield, and Maine.
Jack, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Jack Ducharme, State Representative for House District 71, which is Madison, Norwich, Washington.
Matt Colbitz, Northeast Bank.
Good morning, Jessica Campbell, TD5.
Jason Simcock, Northeast Bank.
Allie Quickson, Maine Department of Education Data Team.
Good morning, I'm Sarah King with the Eastern School Department.
Carla Payne, Zosie, RSU 74.
Holly Eggleston, MSAD 59, Madison.
Bridget Hopkins, North Haven Community School. Lucy Tabor, Northern Maine, Madawaska to Fort Kent area.
Mark Bouchard, RSU 9. No. We just went through
Was that a slip, Mark?
RSU 39, Caribou and Stockholm.
Wish you lived closer.
Katie Gorley, RSU 25, Bucksport, Woollen, Verona, and Prospect.
Thank you all. You had me scared for a second, Mark. I thought I had the wrong school district when I introduced you as RSU 39. I want to talk a little bit about, I mentioned Joanne and what we've done. I think in a year, we've done an awful lot as an organization. I'm going to talk just for a few seconds about what that means, because we had a board meeting last week, and part of that growth, which is good, is also some struggles. Part of the struggles we're having, just so you know, are making sure that we're meeting all of the membership needs, all of the vendor needs. We're meeting the needs of providing good quality professional development and information, whether it's legislatively, whether it's PD, or other areas that we provide. It's a good problem to have, but with that struggle, like I said earlier, Joanne's wearing multiple hats. And that's going to continue for this year. I don't see any change in that. But as we move forward, especially legislatively, and especially in those other areas, I can see with that growth that we're going to have discussions about where is the path forward and what does that path look like. I'm not implying anything with that other than to provide information. I think that path as we go through this year will become more known, and we'll share that with you, and we'll share that information with you. I'm just letting you know that as organizations grow, including your own or any boards you serve on of any nonprofit, there are growing pains sometimes, and we're starting to experience some of those. And I'll mention one in particular. One in particular is Joanne's doing everything from bottle washing to legislative and everything in between. There's only so much time in her part-time schedule to do all that. And we're, as a board, trying to evaluate how does that path forward look and what is the best utilization of her expertise and time. I don't have more to say on that this morning than to share it as information, because I think it's important that you as a membership know that we have pretty much gone from 0 to, I won't say 100, but we're probably up around 80 pretty darn quickly. And with that comes struggles. And we will continue to evaluate those. I do want to emphasize the good in that, because for so many years I stood up here as, where does this organization want to go and what do we want to be? And as a volunteer organization, we said that's not the place we want to go or be. And I think hopefully you've seen a huge change in that in the past year. I also want to talk about the work that Joanne specifically has done in building relationships with state ASBOs and international ASBO. Those relationships, just like our relationships with each other in school finance, are critically important. So are her relationships as our executive director with the other states, specifically New England states, but also other states around the country and international ASBO. And I've got to commend Joanne a huge amount. She has spent a ton of time trying to build those relationships. Whether you know it or not, International ASBO has a fairly new president. She has had direct communication with that individual in representing Maine as MaineASBO with International ASBO. Those relationships are very, very critical as we move forward as an organization. And then when we're looking at certification and professional development, legislative, we're starting to have a voice, not just in a regional sense, but also in a national sense. And that's critically important. I want to talk about membership a little bit. I passionately want to say thank you for those school districts, especially larger school districts that had a single membership in prior years and really took my words to heart and changed to a district membership. We truly appreciate that as an organization. We appreciate you doing that, and hopefully you're going to see that benefit for your entire staffs as well, whether it's HR, payroll, grant accounting, or whatever it may be, that we're providing those resources to you. For those smaller districts, we understand. We understand that a district membership may not be for you. But I truly want to thank you and appreciate your reflection over the past year and for this year coming in on doing district memberships. We have seen a tremendous increase in that as well as participation, and that's awesome. And that's what we're here for. For our vendors, we're still trying to increase vendor membership. We're doing things like we are this morning, and we want to thank not only Northeast Bank, but DeVivo Bus for being here. Without them, they are part and parcel of our relationships. We're looking at other ways to provide other services to them and all of the vendors that are here today in other more meaningful ways, whether it's website. We're looking at, can we do some type of vendor fair that is small and scaled down, but is still a vendor fair at one of our meetings. We're looking at other options, and for you as members and also you as vendors, that if there's things that we can do that are important to you, your relationship with us is critically important as well. So we want to thank you. Professional development. Who is new within the past 2 or 3 years as a business manager? If you don't know by now, September, October, and early November is PD time. So bear with me. It's in Joanne's newsletter. October 18th is the Drummond at MaineASBO at the Augusta Civic Center. We have worked hard on providing and working with Drummond Woodsum on the topics. Joanne and I have met with them. We've gone through them. If you aren't registered for that, please do so. That is going to be a meaningful day. Who was at last Friday in Augusta at the Augusta Civic Center with superintendents? Awesome. Build those relationships with your superintendents. last week. There was information. It was a worthwhile day. I won't say that I left there and said, wow, I think I'm in trouble. But it also reminded me that, holy cow, we really do know what's going on and how it impacts us as business managers and finance directors. For those of you who aren't part of those, encourage your superintendents to include you in some of those. I think for any of us who were there, we also got to meet other superintendents. We also got to interact with them and build those relationships. Those relationships are important as well. So I'd encourage you to continue focusing on that. November 8th, we are meeting again as MaineASBO in Ellsworth, correct? So put that on your calendar. February 28th is again up here in Augusta at the Senator Inn. That is going to be a packed day. I'll let Joanne talk a little bit more about that one. She's done great work in pulling something together for that day that I think is going to be critically important. April 4th, we are tentatively right now in Westbrook, so mark that date on your calendar. Lunch and Learns will occur during the months in which we aren't having in-person meetings and other PD going on. Another few dates to keep in mind, DOE Finance is continuing their sessions. They are October 15th, November 19th, and December 17th. These are all in the newsletter as well. How many people are going to the Brewman and Brewer? Awesome. If you don't know what Brewman is, DOE is putting on a session, which is a national company doing grant, all things grant and grant reporting and grant compliance through the Brewman Group. That is October 22nd and 23rd. I don't know if DOE has more space in there or not. Do you know? No? Different department?
Yeah, different things, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. But emails have gone out on that from DOE. Look at that and search that. MSMA conference. Ironically, I guess I'm not going to be in the office that week because MSMA is October 24th and 25th. So I guess I will be going from Brewer to Augusta. That is at the Augusta Civic Center. Topics for PD. If you have topics for PD, make sure to get them to Joanne. We have built out a calendar already. She has built out topics, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you and that we might not be able to incorporate other topics either in that or in Lunch and Learns. So this is your organization. I've said it for years. It's not mine. It's not the board's. It is yours. You let us know what you want to learn about and what is important to you, and we will do our very best to accommodate that and provide that. Stop for a moment. Any questions on professional development? That was a lot. I think it's important. My takeaway when I was thinking about this last night at home and writing this out for this morning, that's a lot of opportunity to learn. And you may not be able to make all of those. Then review what the agendas are. Review what's being provided and what you need the most in the time that you have. I understand we can't all be out of the office for every one of these. But what's important is that you really get the professional development you need either through us or other organizations to really grow and be the professionals that we are. Yes.
I just wanted to mention for the new ActiFund users, we're starting up an ActiFund user group. So if anyone is interested, see me and we can get together in October. I think the 16th is the date that we're planning on.
Awesome. Thank you. Communication, we've talked about for years. It is my feeling that we as an organization, and Joanne specifically, has done a great job of providing meaningful communication through a newsletter, through the website, and through other means. If there's things that you see and want differently, let us know. Areas that we would really like to see improvement in more traffic is really on the website, really in the ASBO listserv. I know that there's a lot of other areas and other things that you can get communication from and knowledge from, and you should utilize those as well. But we're really trying to support our own organization at the same time, making sure that we're communicating and that you're using that as a resource. I will make another pitch, and I know there's a few in here who probably, I know they agree because we've had conversations. If you are not a member of ASBO International, please look into it and consider it. There is information that comes every single day from ASBO International in the form of a newsletter. I signed my district up as a district member so that all my staff could get those emails as well and feel a part and parcel of what we do in our fields of expertise and get information. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of times when our payroll, HR, or grant people and accounting people have come and said, do you know this is happening? Nope, I hadn't read it yet, hadn't gotten to it. And they're feeling engaged, they're feeling a real part of our business offices and what we do and being the professionals that they are. I know it's not inexpensive. For a lot of districts, you may not be able to do it. But I put that out there because there's a vast amount of information that comes from International ASBO. And you might think, well, it's all high-level stuff. No, a lot of times it isn't. A lot of times it really does get to the core of what we do. I'll let Joanne talk in just a second. I know that she has been trying to work on regional groups, and I'll let her talk more about that. New business managers, and some of us who aren't so new, there's a mentorship program. Doesn't have to go through us. There are people on the website who have agreed to be mentors. There are a lot of people in this room who aren't on this list who are very qualified people to help you as well. Build those relationships if you're new or relatively new to our profession. They will help you immensely. They will give you tidbits that you're never going to learn from an email or some PD. So build those relationships. That would be my greatest advice to you. Adam was a person who, when I first came into this profession, helped me, and it built a friendship and a relationship for years and gave me knowledge I would never have learned anywhere else. So build those relationships with people that you're comfortable with and that you meet that can provide you guidance to succeed in the profession you've chosen. And the last item I have before I turn it over to Joanne is membership. What do you want? I want to know, and we want to know, what are we doing well? What aren't we doing well? We can't be perfect for everybody. What is it that we aren't doing well? What is it that you want from us in this group as Maine ASBO that we can provide and do better? Topics, ideas, can be this morning or any other time. Share. Let us know. Let myself know, let a board member know, let Joanne know. Because we want to provide the best opportunities we can for all of you. Any questions on any of that before Joanne talks?
Can you do
Right.
the minutes approval and the treasurer's report?
You want to come at the end?
Yes, and then
Okay.
I'll segue into.
Sure. Committee reports? Okay. I'll look for a motion for approval of the minutes. When you do that, please say your name so that Dawn, who's in the back, who's secretary, knows who's making the motion in the second, please.
Jennifer Pooler, so moved.
So Jen, thank you. Second?
Second, Sybil.
Thank you, Sybil. Any discussion on the minutes from the April 26th meeting? All in favor? Opposed? And abstaining? One abstention, Denise. Treasurer's report. Treasurer's report was provided to you. You can see pretty much from April until now the balance on April 1st, the amount of deposits and dues and other receipts we've received, the expenditures that we have, and what our balance is right now. I'll entertain a motion to approve the treasurer's report.
So moved.
Have a motion. Zach, are you okay with a second on that?
I am.
Zach is the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the treasurer's report? Opposed? And abstaining? So that's unanimous. Next is Joanne, and then we'll do some committee reports.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
I don't have a whole lot to say. I think Colin covered everything pretty well. I will elaborate a little bit on the February 28th meeting at the Senator Inn. Why we're going to the Senator is I have two topics, as long as the presenters don't let me down, and perhaps I can lean on Representative Ducharme to help me ensure that they show up. Bureau of Labor Standards, all of you have many, many wage and hour questions that are very pertinent to you as business managers, and I've been told that the wage and hour sessions that the DOL does aren't really helpful because they're more geared towards industry. So I've asked them to come, they've agreed, so hopefully nothing will get in the way and we'll be able to have a great session for that. I asked you all for questions, your most pressing Maine PERS issues, and I got some great things. Most of it was about their software, which I found very interesting. So I sent those off, and I'm hoping that they will come as well. They've been asked, so I'm hoping that they will actually be in attendance. And I have a couple other things up my sleeve, so I expect that to be a pretty busy day where we might exceed attendance in a technical school. So that's why we're doing that there. Regional groups for professional development. I know I keep telling you about that I'm going to work on this, I'm going to work on this. Well, by gosh, I'm going to work on this. What I was waiting for this year was to get all of our memberships paid so that I could give those folks who have volunteered to be team leaders in their regions a current list of members. So October 1 will be the day that I start doing that, because membership dues are due on September 30th. System will shut everybody out who hasn't paid. We don't have a lot of open invoices, and that's really awesome this year. So I really appreciate everyone getting their invoices in. So I'll be sending out a list to those folks that have volunteered to be region team leaders, and where I'm missing some team leaders, I will sort of reach out to some people that I think might be good, or look for some suggestions on who might like to volunteer. So that will just enable you to do some targeted PD in your own region. I'll help you. I'll send you a list. I'll help you get speakers or organize. I can, if you do a virtual meeting, I can Zoom in. I'd like to say that I can, make a appearance at every region. Highly unlikely. I can try, but I can support you, but it really will be yours to own, because it will be those things that are pertinent to your region, which may be different from the rest of the state. Today needs to be really interactive. We have 3 presenters that are going to want some back and forth conversation. I know Representative Ducharme has some prepared remarks, but you all have asked me some great questions about what goes on as the sausage is made, and what happens when, the sausage doesn't look right when it comes out, how appropriations might prioritize things. Please ask him a boatload of questions. Same thing with Jim Chassé from DOE. AI, huge deal right now, huge deal. And I know there's a lot of focus on what's happening in the classroom for AI. Well, what about you guys? So let's, grill Jim about that. Then when we get to MEPRI, I know MEPRI sent out a survey. They were directed by the legislature to do a study of EPS and GPA. So it was Resolve Chapter 64, I believe. So that's what they're doing. Working on that, they need to report out, I believe, in either that's in March of 2025, back to the Ed Committee. And legislation may come out of that. So you're gonna wanna be super involved with that conversation. So Amy and Jim will come and tell you what they've done. Please, please, please ask them questions, give them input. Special ed is a huge deal right now. I've got an article in the newsletter already for next month that you'll want to read that came out of International ASBO about the rising costs of special ed, like you don't know, but it's just countrywide and it's very interesting. Speaking of that, I'm trying to keep us on time today. Speaking of that, we're going to need to register early for the November meeting. Hancock County Tech Center needs a head count a couple weeks in advance. So I'm gonna put the October newsletter out probably the end of next week. That will have the link to the form to register. I know it's sometimes hard to plan, but just, if you think you're gonna come, please let me know. And if something happens, totally understand. But I need to get them a head count a little bit earlier than I did for this facility. So that will happen at the end of the week. Does anyone have any questions for me? I feel like, I talked to a lot of you over email, but, obviously we don't get a chance to talk a lot in person. So if something comes up, I'm always happy to jump on a Zoom with any of you. But if you have any questions, fire away. We got, what, minute and a half? See, I know what I'm doing.
Still got committee reports.
Committee report?
Yeah,
What about it?
we got committees to report on.
You didn't do it?
No, I didn't.
Zach, do you have anything to say about legislative? We already did PD.
Hey folks, so for those of you who were at the conference, I believe it was last week or week before, this will be kind of a recap. Of course, the biggest one is Maine paid family medical leave, which you're all going to have to start collecting taxes on in a few months. There's more to read on that. Please go to the October 18th. There was also the pay rates was another one that will affect us pretty soon with the 1.5 times for ed techs and 1.25 time for support staff, and that is above the state minimum wage, which goes up every year based on CPI or some other Maine math. Revolving renovation fund had some changes to what qualifies as an emergency, but they also increased some funding in the law. There was a change to labor law violations and the cost of those. And that also reminded me of last year's law about recovering of overpayments. Since I'm going through a big payroll snafu this week, if you do overpay people, there's some restrictions on how quickly you can regain those funds. So if that does happen, make sure you review that. Another one that came to mind, which isn't that recent, but is just on top of my mind since we had the bus people here. It is the department's goal to have 85% of your buses electronic by 2035. Buses last, what, 15 years? So, and unless you're one of those people that buys all your buses 10 at a time, if you don't start rotating through now, you're going to, at some point, hit a big bill if you're going to meet that goal. Now, how they're going to enforce that goal, who knows? We are one of the districts that's been in the news is having problems with the EVs that we currently have. So I'm not going to get into all that, but I'm just saying that that's something to keep on your radar, that is the goal of the DOE as to how transportation is going to look. For those of you who are not going to retire, it's 2035, I might make it. And I got the October 18th legislative session, I already mentioned that, and that's all I have. So.
Zach, I have a quick question for you there. You had still mentioned the 150 and the 125 as the percentages. One of the things that I had heard was 125 and 115, so what is that?
It is. It's
Did
125 and 115.
Did I miss?
Yeah.
I stated. Sorry, that was my error.
Okay.
Did I
Yeah,
scare
it's
everybody?
125 for ed techs and 115 for all other.
25 and 15. Yes.
I would just like to encourage anybody, if they haven't already, to go on and comment on the DOL's, they have a thing that you can comment on the family medical leave. If you haven't done so already, I would strongly encourage you to go on, read through it, and make comments, because this impacts us in other ways that it doesn't impact regular industry, and I just feel like we need to be heard. So
Yep.
I would really encourage people to go on and do that if you haven't already.
Did everybody hear that?
You can make comments on each
Yes.
section.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, and the one last thing was that the EPS listening session, I believe there's one today at 3 o'clock. It's a Zoom meeting. You log on and they use a little like whiteboard process online that you can leave comments and notes and kind of interactive with them if you want to get in on that discussion.
Okay.
Perfect.
Colin, do you want to talk about Tri-State? And then you can introduce Jason.
I can. Joanne and I were just talking back here where we were going to be in 2035. We're both going to be retired. Tri-State is a great opportunity. You will learn, network, and experience more in those 3 days. Just from a professional standpoint, I know it's a cost. I know districts struggle with that. But I will say with the amount that I see my district spend in other areas on PD, you have to advocate for yourself as well as finance professionals. And you need training and you need that networking as well. I cannot overemphasize enough the importance of that. There are people from Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. You will hear all sorts of different things. You will meet all sorts of different people and have all sorts of different experiences. And it can't compare to anything else that you will encounter, whether you go to a national conference or a regional conference. They are our peers. They are great people, and they have great experiences in their own states, and also like to hear what our experiences are. So I would encourage you heavily to register for that earlier, put it in your planning, and join us in Whitefield in May. That's Whitefield, New Hampshire. Having said that, anything else before we move on to our vendor spotlight? This morning, we're sponsored by Northeast Bank. Northeast Bank was also the premier lead sponsor for Tri-State ASBO last year. Jason and Matt are here from Northeast, and they're going to go over a few items with you this morning. We thank them for their consistent vendor membership as well as their expertise and coming forward and being able to share some of their knowledge and information about the financial and banking world. I don't know if you're a wanderer or a standstill person, so there you go.
Just need a minute or two to get this set up on the screen, so just bear with us for a second. Amazingly fast. Thank you, Matt. So, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Nice to see you all. My name is Jason Simcock. I am a senior government banker with Northeast Bank. And my colleague with me today is Matt Kolpitz. He's the director of government banking at Northeast, so he leads our team. We're just really glad to be here and supporting this organization, the opportunity to sponsor this. I think I've been coming to these events for close to 12 or 13 years. So, and the first time I actually presented in front of you all, I was here. So, but it seems like a long time ago now. So, I'm glad I could, figure out a way to get in here. So, well, today we're just going to talk a little bit more and help introduce Northeast to you all. And I'm going to hopefully provide you with a few takeaways that you can bring back to your offices and hopefully help your school at some point. Like we're going to, first off, we're going to talk about Northeast Bank. So we do have, just so you know, we have a dedicated government banking team at Northeast. We were chartered back in 1872, and we have been growing as of late. We're now the third largest bank in the state of Maine in terms of our asset size. We have 7 branches around the state. And we can bank anywhere in the state of Maine. So we have the technology. We can provide treasury services pretty much anywhere in the state of Maine. One of the things that I think helps to differentiate us a little bit is we do have highly competitive deposit rates. We also don't charge government clients fees or compensating balances. And the nice addition that we're able to offer too is, along with Treasury Services, we provide free courier service as well. So just put that out there. I know that a lot of you in this room probably already have really great banking relationships where you are. So I think that's fantastic. That's good to know. We just want to make you aware that we're also specializing in this business, and that we're interested in helping you any chance we can in the future. So a little bit more about me too. So I've been in government banking now for over 13 years now. Before that, I was in town government. I worked in local government in Maine and Vermont for about 17 years. I'm from Farmington originally, and I only live like 10 minutes away from this here, so this is a really nice location for me. Excuse me. So just while I'm here, just wanted to cover some topic with you, which has been a real interest to me. We've seen some significant changes in the deposit rate market since 2020. So it's been a very interesting time to be in banking, for sure. And you've all been on the receiving side of this. You've all been experiencing changes, with your banking relationships as a result of some of these changes. You've all had the large federal funding come through. Am I right? Yeah. And I'm just curious, with the schools today, are you still spending down some of those federal funds? So you're starting to see the end of the
3 more days.
Yeah.
What's that?
3 more days.
3 more days. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, all right. There it goes. But that was a huge influx that went into the whole system that really rocked the whole banking industry. There was, we're going to talk, I have a screen that actually will show you, what has happened on a national level and how that really kind of impacted what you were seeing for your deposit rates. Currently, it's interesting in the government market, deposit rate market, they don't advertise, banks don't advertise those rates online. You're not able to, compare other banks. It's one of those like where each bank has a customized rate for your relationship with them. So the only way we really learn about it, and we're in the business, is when you learn about like RFP results and things like that. But there's quite a range out there in today's rates. Some are as low as 1% still, and others are closer to 5%. The recent Fed fund rate decrease that happened last week by 50 basis points. Now we're seeing most rates are like the 4.5% range, but they're under 5% at this point. There's a big range out there. And you might as well throw in the big bank failures in 2023 just to make things interesting, right? Where understand it's not always about rate. It can't be. It's like you have a relationship. You've got to be concerned about the safety of your funds. You're audited. Make sure all your funds are protected. But you also want to make sure things are working well too. So you're making payroll. You're able to handle AP and all those things. So. Just a lot of different things happening here. Here's another, here's just a little bit more information about the rates themselves. Most rates out there are going to be a fixed rate. So like for your operating accounts, you probably have with your bank, they set the rate, and that's the way it is until you have a discussion with them or they decide it's time to change the rate. So that's very common to see a fixed rate setup out there with your operating accounts. But there's also some banks that offer indexed rates, and that's actually what we do at Northeast Bank. But that's where a bank will tie your rate to some sort of an outside independent national rate index. There's some examples out there are the Fed funds rate. There's also SOFR. Used to be LIBOR. Some of you may have heard of that. So just say that there is some shifting going on to sort of help stay more current with the changing rate environment. where banks are able to use an index rate. Some are able to do that. So just something to be aware of. And this table you see there is just a list of, this is an example of the effective federal funds rate, which you can see where they made changes. And I just listed, I just updated it, so it just shows the current rate, which is 4.83%. It was 5.33% from July of last year all the way until like last week. So, you know, even though it's that particular rate index can change, it was at a pretty high, that was at a high point for over a year. So that was actually, it's probably going to be the highest we're going to see that in my career. So. Here's just another way to look at the effective federal funds rate. And you know, the way this is it helps us to kind of understand why some of our rates have been where they are for so long. When I first got into banking in the, I guess, 2011, you know, rates were really low and they stayed that way for a long time. And I think a lot of us were just kind of lulled into this low rate environment. You know, you get to focus on other things, you know, but you know, it's kind of interesting to see, like, you know, we were all under 1% for the longest of time. So, but we did start to see things, and you can see that that's also reflective here in the Fed funds rate history. These did see things start to creep up a little bit, you know, around the mid 20-teens, and then, you know, really towards, as we're getting closer to 2020, you know, we were getting like over 2%, and you know, that was unheard of. You know, back when I first started in banking, it was like, you know, 2%, that would have been a high rate. So the fact that we, you know, what happened in the pandemic, we saw things really come way down. There was that cash influx into the system, stayed low for the longest of time. Then all of a sudden banks were starting to scramble for deposits again. So, and the Fed started making their, you know, trying to cool inflation policy moves. They started to increase the Fed funds rate, so you can see how dramatically it came up. Where this goes from here, I don't know, but you know, it's possible we could see, you know, things between 3 and 4% when they get to the point where they feel like they're able to really manage, you know, inflation where they want to keep it. So. Just to give you this background, because I think that's helpful to understand, you know, where some banks are coming from when it comes to what they can offer for deposit rates. How much can it make for an impact on you? And I promise to wrap up in a second. Just so you see that, you know, for like an average of $1 million, you know, and I want you to think about this from, you know, we're not talking about just like investments here. Look at your operating account, consider that as an investment. Because of the size of that deposit, you know, you've got money coming in, you've got money going out, but on average, those monthly deposits are significant, you know? I mean, I've seen them all over the place, you know, with $1 million kind of being on the low end for an average deposit. So if you had just 1% on $1 million, that will give you just over $10,000 in interest. If you were to say 4.5%, now you're looking at $46,000 in annual interest. That's more significant than, you know, than just the $10,000. So, you know, you start to multiply that, and you can see, you know, a $10 million average budget or average balance would give you almost $500,000 in interest. Other example, not just your operating account, but bond funds. We worked with a school earlier this year with their bond funds for a big project, $50 million that they invested short term, and they're going to earn over $1 million in interest just on that, you know, and that is going to make a difference, you know, in what they end up ultimately borrowing for that project. So think about it like that, you know, that these are real tools for you that could help your school. As I know how tight budgets are, and those long conversations you have about how to keep your budgets as flat as possible. Anybody here use ICS for sweep account? Okay, well, we got a few. All right. ICS, so this is one of the tools that you can use to make sure that, that kind of pairs with that interest rate. So ICS is a sweep account. It's automatic overnight. This is where, now the full FDIC coverage on this is up to $170 million. So if anyone has a budget over $170 million, I'd like to talk to you after this. So, but it's the same thing with there's another product available that's called CDARS. That's where you can do lock in a rate if you really wanted to ladder any of your investments short term. Most governments are not going to do more than, most common is a 6-month, maybe a 12-month, depending on what your cash flow needs are. This is just a very brief example about how the FDIC is applied. In case you're curious, basically you work with your primary bank, and most banks in Maine, I think, are offering ICS and CDARS now. So ask your bank if you're not familiar with it. You get to work with them, so they set the rate. What happens is when you place your deposit in ICS, like I said, automatically sweeps overnight, goes into this ICS network, which is now, I think, 3,000 banks are involved in this across the country. Receiving banks will send the increments back to your bank in increments of, it's all under 250,000. So that's how the FDIC is actually applied to those funds. And lastly, if you're wondering, well, this is just another headache for me to try to manage. There is an online tool for you, an actual website you can go in, so you can view these accounts. You can get statements, so you don't have to wait for them in the mail. You get all the information you need online. So this is both for ICS and CDARS now. So that's a nice tool to have handy. And sorry I ran a little bit over, but here's our contact info. Also, just want to say, if anybody wants to put their name in, we're doing a raffle today. Feel free to stop by our booth and take anything you would like, because Matt and I really don't want to carry anything back to the office. So, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. Appreciate your long-term partnership with MaineASBO. I mentioned before, relationships matter, and it's true with ASBO, and it's true with all of your districts with those relationships with professionals. Next, we're going to have Representative Ducharme come up. I want to sincerely thank him for his time this morning in speaking to us about what happens at the legislature, how we can be more involved, and how we can be part of the process. So, Representative Ducharme, thank you very much.
Thank you.
He said he may not need the mic because he knows how to project at the legislature, so I'm going to leave it just in case, but I think he'll do fine on his own.
If anybody thinks I need the microphone, just raise your hand if you can't hear me. Typically, when I use the microphone, the people that are close to the speakers go home deaf. So, learned to project a long time ago. Took some voice lessons when I was a young fella, and have never forgotten it. So, first off, I want to thank Joanne and the Maine Association of School Business Officials for the invitation to speak today. Very flattered by that. I don't think that when Joanne called me or emailed me and asked me if I would speak, we kind of chatted a little bit, and I said, what do you want me to speak about? And this theme of what is it? This sausage, how the sausage is made. It's one of those statements that we in fact use in the State House quite often. How the sausage is made, because quite frankly, it's not a pretty process. I'll tell you that right now. Everybody thinks so. We go down there and we wear suits and all the rest of that stuff, and it's glamorous. It's not. It's nasty. But at the end of the day, we hope we get it right. Just by way of background, again, my name is Jack Ducharme. I serve Maine House District 71. I have the honor of serving the citizens of Madison, Norridgewock, and Cornville. I'm finishing my second term, running for my third term. It is a campaign season. I serve as ranking Republican on the Joint Standing Committee for Appropriations and Financial Affairs. And I will tell you, as a member of the minority party, and I know partisanship is not something that you guys think about a whole lot, but as a member of the minority party, that title and $3.15 will get me a cup of coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. In the environment that we're in, it's very difficult, but we try to do the best that we can. I'm married, the father of 2 boys. I have 9 grandchildren. The reason I tell you that is because one of the reasons I serve is for my grandchildren. I see what's going on in our country, and I want to try and make a difference so that the country that we have now is the country that they will have, or even better. My business background is I've managed a number of different businesses from the early 80s till around 98. In 1998, I went to work for Key Bank in Skowhegan as the branch manager on the Madison Avenue branch. And then in 2000, Skowhegan Savings recruited me to come to work for them as a branch manager. I worked for Skowhegan Savings for 20 years, retired as the regional vice president of Somerset County in 2020. And I retired because I was elected to the legislature. Fortunately, I was old enough to retire, so I did. But if it hadn't been for the legislature, I probably would still be there. Job I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the presentation from Northeast Bank, and I will tell you all, one of the things that you want to remember, something that I think he spoke about very, very eloquently, is pay attention to what you're earning on your stuff. And the reason why I'll tell you that is because my wife just took over a year ago as the town manager of Madison. And they've had the same banking relationship for about 10 years. And so I said to her, I said, are you gonna put out an RFP for your banking relationship? And she said, yeah, once I get things squared away, I'll do that. Well, she was at a MMA conference or something and mentioned that, or spoke with a couple of different bank vendors that were there. And her current bank saw that she was talking with other people. And the week after she got back from the conference, she got a call from somebody at her current bank, and they said, you know, we've been looking at your relationship and we can do a lot better. And she came home and told me, and I said, we'll go back to them and say, how long ago could you have been doing better? And I want to get that money. Someone in this room that knows me very well, Holly, one of the things that we always try to do, what I always try to do as a relationship manager, was make sure my big clients, my important clients, the school districts and so forth, were informed as to the best that we could do. And you should make sure that those people are doing it for you. That's what they're there for. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and say, I'm not happy with that. Fix it. They will. If they won't, somebody will. Right, John? Let's see. For public service background, I actually served on the MSAD 59 school board from 98 to 2004. Served on the Madison Board of Selectmen from 2011 to 2020. And again, I was elected to the legislature in 2020, serving the House District 71. Halfway through my first term, I was recruited by Solomon Millett to fill an opening on the Joint Standing Committee on Appropriations and Financial Affairs. Does anybody here in this room recognize the name Solomon Millett? There's a bunch of hands there. I could tell you Solomon Millett probably, without a doubt, has forgotten more about school budgets, state budgets, and so forth than I'll ever know. Solomon has run several departments in state government. He was a commissioner of education. He was also the DAFS commissioner, Administrative and Financial Services commissioner, served in several governors, I think beginning with Jim Longley, so that's how far back that goes. My exposure to Solomon Millett was, he was my 8th grade geometry teacher. So, And I was just flattered that when they had an opening on appropriations, someone reached out to me and said, I want you to be on appropriations because I'm going to retire and I need somebody that can handle this kind of stuff. He knew I had a banking background and all that. So that's how I ended up on appropriations. So now we talk about how the sausage is made. Anybody served in the legislature? No? It's fun. Frustrating, but fun. The state of Maine uses a budgeting system called baseline budgeting. I suspect that most school districts use this system as well. Baseline budgeting is when you take what you had for a budget last year, add some percentage of increase for salaries and contractual obligations, add in any new initiatives that become your budget, and that becomes your budget for the next cycle. That's a real basic description of it. There's a whole lot more that goes into it from the state level, but I only had 25 or 30 minutes to talk to you about it, so I figured I'd just give you the basic overview. In the state budgeting process, the baseline budget from year to year is assumed to be the starting point. It's interesting to note that most of the discussions and negotiations on the budget that occur in Augusta are really about a very small portion of the budget. When you consider the Maine Department of Education spends about $3.2 billion over the biennium, the amount that actually discussed in committee is minuscule. The amount that doesn't get discussed is the baseline number, and that's a big number. Senator Rick Bennett from Oxford has raised this as a point several times and offered several proposals to address this. Not sure if they're going to go anywhere. Probably not, but it's something that we should consider when we rubber stamp 85% of the budget and fight over 15% of it. It doesn't make any sense. To support the budget, the state of Maine relies on revenue projections. The Maine Revenue Forecasting Committee is a group of people that come together several times a year to forecast what the revenue will be for the state of Maine. This committee is comprised of the state economist, the commissioner of tax policy, a professor of economics from the University of Maine, and several others. They look at economic trends that exist and make a prediction on what the state revenues will be for a given period. Once that revenue projection is made, the state determines if it will have a surplus or shortfall in the budget. If there is a surplus, the balanced budget amendment to the Maine Constitution stipulates that the state must either spend the surplus money or give it back to taxpayers. If there is a shortfall, the state must curtail operations to bring their spending back in line with revenue projections. Over the last several years, the state has experienced some significant surpluses in revenue. These surpluses were largely the result of increased income tax collection due to higher wages being paid, increased sales tax collections due to higher prices on goods and services. In the last 3 years, the state of Maine has returned nearly $1.3 billion in surplus money to taxpayers in the form of one-time rebates. There was a $250 check, $850 pandemic relief check, and a $450 emergency assistance relief check. Those all went out. Those checks all totaled to a little over $1.3 billion. Regardless of how the administration presented these checks, it was a return of taxpayer money that was over-collected. They called it pandemic relief. Okay, it was your money. They called it energy assistance. It was your money. Now, it didn't go back in the same percentage of people that paid it back in those same percentages, but it went back to taxpayers. Back to the budget. The biennial budget is crafted in the first session of the legislature. For the last 2 biennial budgets, the majority party has passed the budget without votes from the minority party. In years past, budgets usually had an emergency preamble that allowed them to become effective upon the signature of the governor. With an emergency preamble, it takes a 2/3 vote. You pass it on a 2/3 vote, it goes directly to the governor's desk, the governor signs it, and it becomes law immediately. The money is available immediately. If it doesn't have an emergency preamble, it gets passed, and even if it has to have an emergency preamble to get a 2/3 vote to be immediately available. I've seen bills where we got 2/3 and they came back and said, we want to add the emergency preamble so it can go into effect immediately. That happens from time to time, but rarely. They usually know when they're going to get 2/3 and not. This is why, this whole emergency preamble business is why we've seen the legislature pass the budget at the end of March and adjourn for the last 2 budgets. This is done so that the budget will be effective for the beginning of the state's fiscal year, which is July 1. Just want to tell you a little story about, and it's really not partisan, it's kind of a personal story. When we were doing the biennial budget for 24-25, I had not yet been named ranking Republican, but everybody knew I was going to be. I had scheduled a trip to Israel. I think we were leaving the 19th of March. So I went to the House chair and the Senate chair of appropriations, and I said, negotiations are going pretty well. We're not at loggerheads about anything yet. Do you think that we're gonna, we pretty much know where we're gonna end up. So do you have any plans to run a majority budget? That was the 17th of March when I talked to them. I left the 19th. On the 17th, both the House chair and the Senate chair said, no, we have no plans to do that. I flew to Israel on the 19th of March. On the 22nd of March, my phone in Israel blew up with texts and instant messages and so forth and so on from folks on my side of the aisle saying they're running a majority budget. So I texted the House chair and said, I thought you weren't going to do this. And her response to me was, have a nice vacation. I'll talk to you when we get back. When I got back, she avoided me for 3 weeks because she knew that she had told me a story, and I was not happy. When the legislature returns in January for the second session, the Appropriations Committee then reviews the revenue forecast done in December. That's what happens after that budget is done. They start the budget in July, like in July of 24, the 24-25 budget started. So in December, the Revenue Forecasting Committee will meet. They will look at the numbers and they will say, okay, based on what we see at the end of June in 2025, you're going to have this much money extra, or you're going to be short this much money. My personal opinion, we're going to be short. Just throwing that out there. Once they do that, then the legislature has to react to that because of the balanced budget amendment. We either have to go out and say, okay, we have supplemental money, we have $20 million too much, so we're going to spend $20 million more, or if we're in the hole, we have to go to departments and say, we're $20 million in the hole, what are we going to do? The last projection I saw from the last reporting, which was March, it looked to me like we were going to be about $500 million short going into the 26-27 budget. Now, $500 million sounds like a lot of money, but when you're talking about an $11 billion budget, $500 million is what it is. They'll figure it out. The governor is terrified about it because she's got the same numbers. And I asked her, I said, do you plan on doing something about this? What are you going to do, raise taxes, or are you going to curtail budgets? And she said, I'm not raising taxes. So we'll see how that goes. When you have a surplus, the governor proposes a supplemental budget. Each department gets a chance to take a bite of that surplus apple, but ultimately the governor proposes the supplemental budget to the legislature. The budget is then distributed to the legislative policy committees for review. Each department reports to a legislative policy committee. Obviously, education reports to the education committee, human services, the Department of Human Services, IF&W, they all have their own committees. And so those committees, those legislative committees, take a look at what the budget looks like and makes recommendations back to appropriations for us to look at and say, okay, how are we going to make this work? And they all do that in their own little silo. You know, for example, in the last supplemental budget, the Education Committee came back and they had, the governor had proposed, let's just say, for example, $10 million in supplemental money out of $340 million for education, and they came back and they wanted $80 million. And my response was, well, what other department am I going to take that $70 million from? And they're all like, we don't care. You take it from whoever you want, but we want $80 million. And I'm just using education because that's one that I remember being in that kind of situation. After the budget is distributed to the policy committees, they do a report back. Some of these committees dissect this budget and add their own priorities. Others simply ratify with the proposal from the governor and send it on to us. The Appropriations Committee then reviews all the policy committee report backs and constructs the final budget in the supplemental budget. Again, this supplemental budget, like the biennial budget, needs a 2/3 vote of the legislature to be enacted on an emergency basis. In 2024, the supplemental budget failed to get 2/3 vote, so any funds allocated in that supplemental budget could not be dispersed until 90 days after adjournment, which was May 10th. Those funds became available August 9th. So when everybody, all of a sudden, the state said, yeah, okay, August 9th we have money, that's why, because they had to wait 90 days. How does this budget business affect the schools? As you all know, schools are funded in part by the state of Maine using Essential Programs and Services model. When the EPS model was passed in 2005, the state committed to funding general purpose aid to education through the EPS formula at a rate of 55%. That level was not achieved until 2021. The 2005 law that established the 55% level of funding also placed statutory caps on state spending once that level was achieved. The current administration changed those caps from a percentage increase tied to consumer price index to a simple 98% of projected revenue based on the December revenue forecast of the prior year. So when we go back in May, March, April, May, when we're looking at the budget, we will look at that and we'll look at the December forecast, this coming December forecast, to see what we can spend. 98% of that. Doesn't leave us a whole lot of wiggle room. The EPS formula has worked fairly well for many years. However, there's a number of one-off tweaks to it. There's been a number of one-off tweaks to it to meet the needs of specific constituencies. This has caused some imbalances in the formula that I believe need to be corrected. For this reason, I sponsored LD 293, an act to revise the school funding formula in the 131st legislature. It was kind of interesting how this came about. Maine Development Foundation does a bus tour for legislators during the year in the spring of the year, and they get on a bus with members of each side of the party, and we're on the bus for hours on end, and we talk and so forth. And on that bus tour, there were 4 or 5 of us that were all talking about how the EPS formula has been broken and how do we fix it and so forth and so on. So I put in a bill, LD 293, which asked for a study to be done about all of those tweaks to the EPS formula to see if there was a way to make sure that those issues those issues were covered, but in doing so, the money didn't get taken away from another critical area. One of the things that I've figured out in the EPS formula is when Rangeley says we need more money because we're a rural area and we need more money for transportation, and the EPS guys go, okay, well, we're going to give you a little more money. They forgot that string was hooked to somebody on this side. So somebody in Wyndham says, wait a minute, we didn't get the money. And those are the kinds of things that I could see in looking at how the EPS formula was being administered. And so because various constituencies had political power and were able to go to Augusta and say, hey, we need help here, when those, maybe a more rural constituency didn't have that kind of political power, it was a problem, and it continues to be a problem. The interesting thing is in the 131st, we had 5 bills that asked for changes in the school funding formula. I'm just going to read through them because it's kind of cool how it came about. LD 889 was an act to better support educational attainment of low and moderate income communities. LD 951 was an act to amend the state education funding formula to create equity by adding median income. LD 1158, an act to recognize the critical nature of workforce development through career and technical education by establishing an adjustment for CTEs in the school funding formula. LD 1160, a resolve to conduct a study on the equity of the state education subsidy formula, and LD 1369, an act to amend EPS funding formula to include all costs for transportation to students. And finally, LD 1402, an act to provide additional allocation in school funding formula to cover tax-exempt property or a large economically disadvantaged student population. Of these bills and my bill, LD 293, only one passed. The only one passed was LD 1160, which was modified in committee to address all the other issues that were in all those other bills. My bill asked for an independent group, not MEPRI, to do that, because I felt like even though MEPRI does some good work, what I wanted somebody to do was kind of look at it without the detritus of history and all that stuff, to just go, okay, this is what it is. And the administration said, no, we can't afford that. It would be $500,000 or something like that to do that. So we're going to have MEPRI do it. And then I had some conversations with the folks at MEPRI and was reasonably assured that we were going to get a real unjaded look at it. So it remains to be seen. The 1160 required a report back in the second session, 131st, with the authority to craft a bill to make any necessary changes. LD 2286 was that bill, introduced in the second session of the 131st by the Education Committee Chair, and was passed and became Chapter 164, which I know you're having a presentation on later today. This resolve is the result of the work done in LD 1160 and will result in another report to the legislature not later than March 15th, 2025. The end result is another study that may result in legislation to potentially fix any issues with essential programs and services going forward. The big issue for me, and probably everybody in this room, is how long this can will get kicked down the road. I've asked Joanne if I can stay and listen to the discussion later on, because I'm really interested in this, because one of these was my bill and I want to know where they're going with this and how this is going to play out. As I conclude, I must tell you I have deep concerns about the coming fiscal year and the coming biennial budget. Based on the last revenue projections I saw, like I told you, I think we'll be about $500 million short of meeting projected expenses in the 26-27 budget. Taxpayers in many municipalities, and I'm sure folks are dealing with it in this room, are standing up and voting down school and municipal budgets that they believe are too high. I also believe that since the state is now funding 55% of general purpose aid to education, there'll be increased scrutiny on spending by the state. Further complicating matters is all the federal money that has flowed into the state and to school systems since 2021. I have concerns that we have programs that were funded with these one-time funds that cannot be sustained by ongoing tax revenues. And that's both at the state level and at the school district level. I don't know what everybody's budgets are, but I would challenge you to look at your budgets and see what things are out there that you funded with ARPA money or COVID money or something like that, that is probably going to end up as an ongoing program that's going to end up on the backs of your taxpayers. Some of these things may result in some big obligations that will be difficult to reverse when the funding dries up. And I'm not beating up the school districts for that. I'm saying I think that problem is at the state level as well. I think there's a lot of things that they've funded. They've funded as one-time things, and then we'll come back in the budget and they'll say, well, you only funded it one time, so we're going to continue this program, so now you have to fund it. Well, guess what? You just increase the cost to taxpayers. It just is the way it is. These are the realities we all face. We must recognize We have to find a way to balance doing the right thing for the students of Maine with what taxpayers can afford. While serving as a Madison selectman, particularly during the shutdown of Madison Paper in 2016, we would continually ask that if we would make sure that taxpayers knew what their druthers cost. I'd rather do this, I'd rather do that. What's your druthers cost? If you'd rather do this or you'd rather do that, make sure you know what it's going to cost you. Make sure your taxpayers know what it's going to cost you. Taxpayers are pretty amenable when you communicate to them, when you say, this is what you want. You voted for this, and once in a while you have somebody, well, I didn't vote for it. Well, guess what? You're in a minority. It is what it is. If you want to be in the majority, then get the majority, and that's what we're trying to do in Augusta. But make sure they know. When I served on the MSAD 59 school board many years ago, I always wanted to provide Madison kids, my kids, with the very best education that our local taxpayers could afford. Lots of times you hear people talking about, we want to provide the best education money can buy. Well, unless you have an unlimited pot of money, you got to add the other piece to it. The best education that your taxpayers can afford. That's the key. I feel the same way today with respect to both the school, municipal, and state budgets. One of the things we talked about earlier this morning was talking about how can you in this room talk to people like me. My phone number is immediately available to anybody that just Googles my name. Your state representative should be somebody that you have in your phone directory on your phone. And if they're not, get them there. Your state representatives really, really want to know what you think. And I talk to people in the hallway. I talk to my counterparts in the hallway, and they talk about, one of the things that they talk about was, we have this, this is the presentation from Maine School Management, this is the presentation from Drummond, Woodson, and so forth and so on. And my question is, what about the people that do the work? I want to know what your solutions are, because when you have the solutions, you're closest to the problem. Now, maybe we can't afford all those solutions, but at the end of the day, if we know about them and we can afford them, we can implement them. So don't be afraid to speak up, to talk to people like me. I take phone calls. I answer my phone all the time, and people say, oh, I didn't expect you to answer your phone. It has a ringer on it. I rail at my wife for shutting her ringer off, because when I want to call her, I want to call her. I don't want to get voicemail. So I feel the same way. Sometimes you're going to get voicemail, because I'm probably on the phone. So make sure you reach out. A couple of things just from listening to what was going on here early this morning. There was a discussion about department goals. The EV mandate for buses, and I read in the paper where the department has hired Glenn Cummings to be the facilities guy or whatever, to make sure our schools are green and climate friendly and resilient and all that stuff. I didn't write this down. I hope you're not recording it, but I'm going to ask you a question. If we're 43rd in the nation in education, should that be our priority right now? I'm sorry, but I'm all for being responsible with the climate and all the rest of that stuff. But if we can't get our scores up, if we can't get our kids educated, then having a beautiful place to live doesn't mean anything. I mean, we have to make that a priority. We have to. The other one is paid family medical leave. The comment period ends 9/30. I had a conversation last night at an event I was at with someone about that, and the business community is just absolutely terrified about how that's going to go. The municipal government community is absolutely terrified about that. School districts are absolutely terrified about that for a variety of reasons. The comment period, like I say, ends September 30th. I would encourage you to reach out there. The rules have been written. Last night somebody said, well, the rules are all written and they're just in comment period. Well, guess what? The rules will be rewritten. I could pretty much guarantee you those rules are going to be rewritten at some point in time, because they've not taken into account the municipal piece, they've not taken into account the school district piece. You know, most school districts already have their own paid family medical leave thing. And oh, by the way, the towns and the school districts are going to have to pay in the first 18 months. You know, I mean, those things just make no sense to me. But from an actuarial perspective, again, you know, put my banker hat on. Well, yeah, you gotta seed that thing, because they know that 0.5% from each side, employer and employer, is not going to pay the bills once that thing goes live. Guarantee you. Guarantee you. That thing will be upside down in 18 months. Unfortunately, that's just one of those things. So, reach out on paid family medical leave. Don't hesitate to reach out. I mean, I don't care if you live in my district. I get elected by the people of Madison, Cornville, and Norridgewock. But when I go to Augusta, I look at it that I serve all of the people of Maine. Because if I don't look to serve all of the people of Maine, even though, you know, maybe people think differently than I do, well, guess what? At some point in time, we have to come together on those things to get stuff done and to do the right thing for the people of Maine. Serving in the legislature, particularly on appropriations, is one of the most interesting, most exhilarating, most exciting, most frustrating, and most disappointing things I've done in my career. We work long hours, sometimes unnecessarily, to try and do the right thing for the people of Maine. Sometimes we get it right, and sometimes not. If we don't get it right, the nice thing is one legislature cannot bind another, so the next legislature coming in can fix it. I want to thank you for the invitation to speak. I appreciate all the work that all of you do for our state's kids in your various districts. As I was listening to the introductions around, I was thinking, okay, well, in this district, I know these people in this district, and in some of the districts, I was like, oh, I know who the representative is there, and that kind of thing. But thank you for what you do. Happy to take any questions. I got time?
You're okay.
Yeah. Happy to take any questions. If I can't answer it, I'll write it down and I'll get an answer.
So I was a little intrigued by the rules will be rewritten for the family medical leave. What does that mean exactly? Do you think that what we are reading now is going to change dramatically, or what?
Well, the initial set of rules already went out, had a comment period, and the comment period was pretty dramatic. Went back. Maine Chamber of Commerce was very instrumental in getting them to go back and say, okay, we need to do some different things on these rules. So now they've come out with a next set of rules, and I'm not sure that the Maine Chamber had much commentary about school districts and so forth and so on. I think that piece has only kind of surfaced just in the last month and a half or so, as school districts come back to session and people get off vacation, and all of a sudden they're looking at all of these rules and they're going, oh wow, this is going to impact us in a big way. And so now that's another piece. So I think that will, I'm really in hopes that they will do the right thing and pull those rules back and say, whoa, wait a minute, we're not ready. They want to be ready, but I think if they get enough public outcry and then maybe some legislative pushing, they'll bring them back and they'll fix that. I mean, I quite frankly, I think they should exempt municipalities and school districts, and I'd be happy to tell Senator Matty Daughtry that. There's no question.
Please do.
You know? Yeah. It's just one of those things. It just, it just makes no sense, But anyway, did you have a question up here?
I was gonna basically ask the same thing. I wanted to ask.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Other questions?
I think overall, and I won't speak for everyone, but from what I've heard in my role and Joanna's heard her role, especially over the past 3 or 4 years in particular, whether it's earned paid leave, whether it's paid family medical leave, there seem to be more bills that slide in or come into law that affect school districts, that affect the general populace, but that school districts already have mechanisms in place for time off, family medical leave, including school employee family leave, but yet we as school districts still fall under the umbrella of these laws, which end up costing taxpayers money for stuff we already have.
Right.
Is there a way for us, as finance directors and business managers, to have a better and more strong influence with representatives to say, we already have this, why don't you exclude school districts from this or municipalities?
The short answer to that is 3 words. And nobody wants to hear them, but I'll tell you what they are. The 3 words are elections have consequences. That's it. Elections have consequences. I'm going to give you an example of how those kinds of things happen. The most powerful lobby in the halls of the State House is MSEA and MTA. The most powerful. What you're going to be saddled with after 24-25, the ed tech pay raise. I mean, I have a list in my computer at home of what it's going to cost every district. Holly, in our district, I think we're in good shape. It's like $40,000. But down the road in Skowhegan, their number is more like $200 and some odd thousand. That when the state funding for that goes away, that's going to be there. That was put in place as a result of lobbying by MTA. And it was put in place without a vote. It was put in place without a vote of the legislature. You know how that was done? They passed it through committee on a unanimous vote. This is kind of inside baseball. You want to understand how things work? If you go to a committee with a bill and it gets passed on a unanimous vote, it comes to the chamber, and then what happens is it does what they call go under the hammer. So if you hear a legislature talking about, well, I didn't vote on that, it just went under the hammer. What happens is we'll look at the calendar in the morning and we'll see this comes from a committee unanimously. Well, at that point in time, if it's a unanimous committee report on a bipartisan committee, then chances are nobody's going to stand up and holler about it. Even now, some of these things are coming out of committee with a 9-3 or a 9-4 vote, and they're just going, no, we're just going to let it go under the hammer. Maybe it's a politically charged thing, like the ed tech thing. They just let it go under the hammer, and that's a leadership discussion. That's a leadership thing. Sometimes I say, why don't we challenge these things? And leadership was like, do you really want to be here until 3 o'clock in the morning? Well, sometimes we ought to be there until 3 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes we ought to start on time. We have a 10 o'clock start time, and I don't think we started at 10 one time, or maybe 2 times, in the whole 131st legislature, 2 sessions. That bill, the ed tech bill, went under the hammer, showed up on the appropriations table. When it came time for the supplemental budget, I did my own supplemental budget as the minority. That was not in my budget. Sorry, ed tech, it was not. I didn't think it was the right thing to do because I knew the impact on local communities. The majority party had a bunch of money and they said, okay, we're going to take those pet bills of ours off the table and we're just going to fold them into the supplemental budget. So what they did was they took the ed tech bill as part of their budget, rolled it in. Well, they didn't have money enough to do it, so they tried to steal the highway money, and that was such a kerfuffle that they didn't end up with that. But they did take $60 million out of our rainy day fund or our budget stabilization fund in violation of the budget stabilization fund law. They violated the law. But they have this word in Augusta called notwithstanding. I'm going to try that the next time I get stopped for speeding. Notwithstanding any law to the contrary, I want to go 90 miles an hour on the interstate. I wonder how that's going to get me. If that's going to get me off the ticket? I don't think so. But the legislature has this thing called notwithstanding. Notwithstanding any law to the contrary, we're going to do this. And if you don't like it, well, guess what? We get to make the laws so we can do whatever we want. Folding this ed tech bill into that budget was part of that. I mean, just those are the things that I would say. And the reason why I say elections have consequences. Make sure the folks that you're voting for are going to represent you. Individually, make sure they're going to represent you as a district. Are they going to do the right thing for the people of Maine? That's what I want to do. I remember back in December of 2022, I introduced myself to the current Speaker of the House. Had never met her before. So we were talking in the hallway, and I went and introduced myself to her, and we talked a little bit, and I said, Speaker Talbot, Ross, I just want you to understand that I don't think anybody is in this building to do the wrong thing. I think we all want to do the right thing for the people of Maine, but we come at it from a different perspective, so we have different points of view. I said, but at the end of the day, if we always do the right thing for the people of Maine, we can't go wrong. And she said, boy, I really hope that everybody that's in this building believes that same thing. At 12:15 one night, after a particularly difficult vote, doesn't matter what it was, but it was something that was, in my view, the wrong thing for the people of Maine. We were making our wrap-up speeches. The vote had happened. We had lost. Our side had lost. The other side had won after a 8-hour protracted vote. I stood up. She recognized me. I said, Madam Speaker, I said, you remember December 7th, 2022? I said, you and I met in the hallway for the first time. I said, and you and I agreed that there was nobody here in this body that really didn't want to do the right thing for the people of Maine. And my final comment to her was, Madam Speaker, tonight you did not do the right thing for the people of Maine. And I sat down. Just a mic drop kind of thing. Done. It was very frustrating. So when I say it's frustrating, disappointing, what you have to do is you have to have thick skin. Down there you have to just kind of, okay, well, we're going to move on to the next fight. So, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I think we're facing it all across the board. I think unpaid leave and paid family medical leave are the two primary ones that schools already feel like they have covered and should have had covered.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not speaking for ASBO or everyone in this room. I'm just saying, from my talks with folks who are financial directors in Maine, I feel a lot of folks believe that those two are going to cost their local taxpayers a fair chunk of money in order for us to comply with what is already past provisions within the law.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
You mentioned your two biggest lobbyist group were MTA and MSCA.
Correct.
So we have MSMA and MSBA that are fairly vocal as well. So can you give us some feedback on why they listen to one over the other more?
MSCA, when they have a bill before us, they will bring 300 people. MTA, Maine Teachers Association, when they have a bill before us, they will bring 75 people. Look at the legislative schedule when you're looking at who's out for the day. You know, you might see something there. But I can tell you, I can tell you, when I walk through the hallway, it is just, we call it running the gauntlet, because, you know, as I go through there, and I noticed it, I didn't notice it so much until I was on appropriations, but when I came on appropriations, everybody wants to talk to me. I guess because we got the money. Well, you know, my title and $3.15, that's what I tell them, you know. And I got to the point this session where I would just say, you need to talk to the majority party, because they're not going to listen to us. They're going to do what they want to do. And those are the things those are the challenges that we have. But that's how they do it. Your groups may have 2 people. When you're 2 people in a hallway and you're surrounded by 100 MSEA employees, guess what? You know, you have to step out and say, hey, can I talk to you? You know, those are the things. Actually, I would tell you, if your folks want to be effective at lobbying, get to know guys like me. Just get to know guys like me. When I'm walking through the hall and I see somebody in the hallway that I've talked to earlier in the week, or has called me or sent me an email or something like that, if I recognize you or whatever, I'm going to want to stop and talk to you. Because I'd rather talk to somebody that I know has an opinion that I can deal with than all of the people that are pulling at my jacket saying, Representative Duchamp, can we talk to you? You know, it's just the way it is. And we always tell people that. If you have a particular issue that you want to lobby for, reach out to us. Reach out to us privately. And then be there. And don't be afraid to ask us. Don't be afraid to say, hey, who else should I talk to? I mean, there are lobbying firms that call me all the time and say, Representative Duchamp, who should we talk to about this issue? Okay, that's going to be a person on the Agriculture Committee. Okay, fine. Who's the best person to talk to? Most of the time I know who the chair is or who the Republican lead is, and send them that way. But those are the key things. The Northeast Bank guy talked about relationships. Relationships are the key. You know, you're not faceless constituents at that point. You become somebody that and don't be afraid to say to us, hey, we think that was stupid. Because if it was stupid, we'll tell you why we did it. But we want that feedback from you, because as you probably know, no offense to any superintendents in here, but we probably get the viewpoint that they collectively have decided that they want to present to the legislature. And sometimes that doesn't, you know, what that viewpoint projects may work well in Cumberland or in Yarmouth or something like that, but it just kills Madison and kills Kennebec. You know, up north, I mean, some of those things, it's just impossible to do. And so we need to know that. And it's unfortunate the state is kind of bifurcated like that, but it's just the nature of the state and the population. You know, they're a big population down there. That's why they get all what they get. But sometimes somebody has to stand up for the rural areas. That's me. If you watch video of committee meetings early in the morning, 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, I sit on the left side, and if you see me all of a sudden, my arms waving all over the place and pointing to the windows, I'm probably telling them this is why the people of Maine don't trust us, because we do this stuff in the middle of the night. So feel free to reach out and talk to us. It's important. It is critically important. You guys are basically responsible for the future of our state. And we need to know what's working and what's not. And I can tell you DOE is not, in my view, I don't think that's where, I don't think your interests are being represented. I think there are interests being represented in DOE that may not necessarily reflect what your folks in your towns need. No other questions?
One of the things that, you know, and I know there was a large amount of bills that came up about, and we didn't talk about, but the rising cost of special education, and particularly around special purpose private schools. And what's kind of interesting about that is there were some changes to what they could do, but one of the things I kind of find fascinating with it is they're being completely served with all state and federal dollars, pretty much. I mean, maybe they have a little type of private funding that they get outside of that, but aren't subject to those annual financial audits to see how the spending is happening or a formula in how their spending is happening. It just kind of gets based on the IEP, and then that's where this kind of uncontrollable cost goes. And it's like you having only 85% of the budget's taken care of for you and 15% you're fighting over. I mean, that's really where we've fallen with that. So I don't know if there's stuff on the horizon.
You're absolutely right. I don't know about that piece in particular, but you're absolutely right. It's funny how we spend a whole lot of time doing reports to make certain people accountable, and then we just kind of look the other way with other areas that just we should be kind of looking at and saying, maybe we should make that accountable too. It is, you know, if we had a balance in the accountability piece, I think that would be helpful.
Thank you very much, Representative Ducharme.
Thank you. Call anytime.
Any quick, just one-word topics that you'd like me to try to weave into what I already have prepared on the topic of tech? As they come to you, we can have a little bit of time at the end as well. Thanks for having me. Your last presenter, I didn't know if I should give the Democrat, response or what. Actually, when I was superintendent of schools in Greenville, Moosehead Lake, it was very interesting, and we fought the state tooth and nail most of the time. I'm trying to remember the reps, Paul Stearns and another guy, but anyways, we were a 0% receiver, so we were 100% funded locally, except for, federal grants and so forth. And it was always puzzling to me because way back when I started in this business, the median income was part of the equation, right? So the free and reduced lunch rate in Greenville was something like 66% or something like that, but yet we were a 0 receiver. And the reason was why?
Lake property.
Moosehead Lake, that's right. So I live in Liberty now, and we are renovating a cabin. We had like a midlife crisis, my wife and I. We have 4 daughters. Got a cabin that was in the family, and we've been trying to renovate it to live there. And this year, my taxes are up $800. So I was like, wow. And so that's it has its own little story of why, but it was very interesting. So it seems like some of this is trending maybe, and I'll stop there with any comments. But thanks for that last presentation. All right, so are we ready? Here we go. I hope you can laugh a little bit. I hope I can do that because the topic isn't always fun sometimes. What's that say? All right, so as of when you get back today, right now you get a phone call. There it is. You've been breached. School breaches are on the climb. After you freak out a little bit internally, what are you going to do? What do you do right away?
Call IT.
Call IT.
Call IT.
Call IT. Okay. IT. Unfortunately, IT. He just quit. He got done. He had enough. What do you do next?
Implement your cyber plan.
Ooh. If you whoop. Looks like
Been breached.
looks like I have them.
That's interesting.
Yes, yes.
Maybe I can go on my phone if this thing will do it. Just give me 2 minutes. Yeah, so as that, I think it has to reboot. One of the interesting things about working for the state is you're part of Maine OIT. So all of the agencies fall underneath Maine OIT, and it looks like their timing of rebooting my machine for any updates happens to be right now. That's what I think. That's what I think just happened. So I'll get back in there. But your answer is correct. What is my incident response plan, and how do I? And what's on Netflix? I don't know. What's my incident response plan? Not all schools have that. So one of the things that I do, I'll talk a little bit about myself while this comes back on here. So I spent a career in education. I started as a teacher coach for many years. Became a technology coordinator because I was like the smart person in the school, and I seem to have a knack for this stuff. And most of your IT directors, and I work with them statewide, they were the math teacher, right, or the music teacher, and they did a little bit of coding, a little bit of programming. There are very few that I would call purists. In other words, they went to school for computer science, BS, master's degree. A lot of them sort of graduated up within the school ranks. And this was when getting online was kind of cool. It wasn't expected. It wasn't part of the day-to-day delivery of everything, right? Everything touching cyber. And so as time has progressed, we go through the pandemic and everybody's online, right? If you weren't one-to-one, the funds went to go one-to-one. And particular challenges with that for sure. All right. Oh, closer. You want to see the boot up process when you work for the state? So I spent many years as a teacher, coach, and then moved into school administration. I was high school principal in Orono for 8 years. I was at Bangor Christian as the headmaster for 3 years. Guilford, Piscataquis High School for 4 years. What else have I done? I was superintendent for 5.5 years. And then I'm at the DOE, so maybe 28, 29 years total doing different things. All right, hang on. It's funny too, because part of incident response, in a short period of time, if the network's down, the school system's almost down, right? It's like, it's crazy. So when it comes to your roles, what does that mean for you exactly? When your ADS system is down, infinite visions or student information and so on and so forth. So very interesting times as far as that goes. How am I doing? Good. Yeah, but I'm using a different, I'm using the
They will let you
wrong.
close that until you click on it.
Oh, thanks,
Yes.
Ally. Former student Ally Cookson, by the way. I got it. All right, here we go.
I do what I can.
Yeah, so if a teacher's driving too much instruction with technology and you have a day like this, it's not fun.
You're just demonstrating how we problem solve.
It's true. It's true. All right, this is where we were. Bam.
All Nantucket public school students were dismissed early today after a cyber attack. The district says all student and staff devices, as well as safety and security systems, including phones and security cameras, had to be shut down after they were compromised by ransomware. Officials told students not to use any school-issued devices at home until further notice, concerned that home networks could be compromised as well.
So that answer was correct. You would turn to your incident response plan. And what does that look like? It's funny with your emergency response plans at the local level. I've dealt with things like death of a faculty, death of a student. One day when I was Orono High School principal, a popular student that had recently graduated, it was like the second day of school, lost his life. And I had to bring the faculty into the staff room and tell them that in the morning. And I was brand new to the position, so I wasn't as effective as they were. But you can imagine what that does, you know. And so we had, you go to an instant response plan and bang, this is what to do. Because when the stress hits and the moment comes, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. I've dealt with a ton of different technology-related crises, I guess, over my career. So you look at what it is that your plan says. A lot of school districts actually do not have a cyber response, and that's something we've been working on with Maine School Management, the state of Maine, CISA, and to get those into your plans. And in fact, this one's nice. Ryan Barnes, one of our CISA reps in the state, has a very good flow chart on what to do for a cyber incident. There'll be a QR code if you want any of this material at the end to bring back with you. So last year, this was the first in the country, we did a thing called K-12 Cyber Storm, which is a tabletop exercise. I remember as a high school principal, I had this amazing resource officer, Ed Lesky, Officer Lesky. And he would come in to my office and go, Jam, he's from the South. Jam, you know that Mr. Jones? Yeah, I know him. He hates you. Why? What is it? I'm kind of a nice guy. Well, if he comes in, he's been known to do some violence, and if he comes in your office, what are you going to do when he comes in here and he's going to do this and that? And it was very interesting. So he would constantly kind of walk around the school and give people this like quick scenarios. So to be prepared was crucial. The increase in issues with cyber, sort of necessitate being ready for that as well. So I work with IT directors statewide, and we held a K-12 cyber storm that had a great attendance, and the group continues on today working locally for their own incident response plans. One of the good things, perhaps, out of the pandemic, it can be good if used well. I think people still need to get together, but is the use of online learning. So this is how we held our cyber training. And these were the schools and districts that participated. But have you seen my smart home?
Open door. Door open. Radio on. Playing radio. And do lights. Lights on. Protein shake. Making protein shake. New York. Loading New York. Set speed. 4. 4. 6. 6. 16. 16. 4. 16. 4. 16. Election 16. She was too young. Maybe good luck. And I was Lights down. Only 16. Only 16.
From one classic to another, this is Summer of '69.
Yeah, so the double-edged sword of cyber, right? I mean, I got my mom, she's like 77, I think. I finally got her an iPad that's connected to US Cellular or some data source. And she can see her grandkids from all over, the world and so on and so forth. Prior, she just would visit once in a while if they made it back to Maine. Everything at my fingertips. I'm building a garage. I have no friggin' idea what I'm doing. I am not a carpenter, but YouTube knows what it's doing, I guess. Right? So I've been following, okay, so what does rise over run when you're building stair treads, and how do you figure that out? So the instant use of it all, it's amazing, the world at your fingertips, right? And you can't survive without it. In fact, part of the broadband projects in the state of Maine and equity are, especially with older populations, to participate. So I'm a bow hunter. The only way to get a doe permit was to do it online. I mean, maybe there was another way, right? But you had to participate that way by getting online and accessing it. This is an overwhelming thing for a lot of our population still. So anyways, we work a little bit with that. But that double-edged sword over time is pretty amazing, the growth. When Senator King, then governor, introduced the laptop program, the changes have been, incredible. In fact, when I mentioned, can you function without it, So learning through technology, our LTT team, it's part of the Office of Innovation at the DOE. This is what we focus on, professional learning, which is PD for teachers, for integrating technology into the classroom. A newer one over the last few years has been infrastructure, so connecting with Network Maine, your internet service provider, federal and state opportunities. We did a cyber performance grant to bolster cybersecurity. I'll get to that in a minute. And then just some basic help between vendor, state, and local opportunity. Sometimes you lose an IT director. We can help with that as well. Student leadership, as you know, for years we've been doing the student conference. We do that at the University of Maine in the spring. And we also do something called the Winter Classic, which is an online opportunity, a game-based opportunity. And then the one-to-one device distributing technology. So that's what we do. That's our group. In statute, there is a Distinguished Educator Program. So some of these people are full-timers at the DOE. Most of them are 2-year terms. They rotate as a Distinguished Educator, and they're available to school districts to go in and work with staff and teachers to help integrate technology. I mentioned the device program. You probably remember it used to be all Macintosh. With the Page administration, that changed to be more choices. The Mac is more expensive for sure. I think right now it's like maybe 60% Apple, 35% Chromebook, and less than 5% PC Windows. Which is interesting when you work for the DOE because we all use PCs, but we're servicing the field that's using other products. That was our student conference. Tech Camp was the theme last year, and this is the Winter Classic that I mentioned. It's an online game all about the state of Maine. Great for Maine history. We do a thing called MLTI Slam, which is students led by the director out of the Newport school districts. And to talk about AI for a moment, for the last couple of years, there's been a moratorium on the use of AI at the state level, so no state employee can implement the use of AI. Recently, a policy came out that is a state policy. You can find it online. that highlights what the use can be. It's a hot topic everywhere you go. It's amazing. Does any AI experts out here?
Experts or users?
Users? How about users? AI users? What do you use it for?
Writing things like memos, essays. I have a daughter that's 16, so they're using it in the classroom, so I've had to learn.
Yep.
Because I need to show her or teach her what is right and wrong. We used it, we had a friend of it when we did like this Christmas poem essay thing, and those of us that used AI, like,
Yeah.
help, like, the fun things out of it.
Thanks. Another one? We'll just move here. Anybody else?
I use it for Excel commands all the time now. When I'm trying to do something with Excel, I'll use that to get directions on it.
Yeah, the intricacies of Excel, how deep you can go with that. Yeah, I use it for stuff like that as well. Obviously, coding is a big one that's used now. There still is definitely some worry out there. I think the United States has to lead in this. I don't think we can be fear-based when it comes to it, but certainly school systems are trying to figure that part out, and students as well. The teenage brain and like, well, I guess I had my homework done. It only took me 10 seconds. You know, there's definitely that going on out there, and locals trying to figure that out. We have an AI specialist within our team, so if a district really needed that, they are available. I'm excited about the large language model just because what that means for potentially my own grandkids. I have 10 of them. What does that mean for a body of knowledge over time as it continues to grow at exponential rates for cure of disease, let's say, would be one use. We provide some grants. This one is Teach with Tech, where teachers can submit a proposal and the state purchases some technology for them. We operate Moose and Engine, which are online learning modalities which came into being through the pandemic. We also provided mobile labs for every class, every school in the state to try to bolster our computer science efforts, coding. If you're interested, we have a podcast that you can look up and listen to if you're interested. This one's pretty big. Somebody mentioned it earlier. So the state pays for initial access for all school systems to be part of A4L, which is Student Data Privacy Agreements for apps. So a teacher's in a classroom and like, hey, this app is amazing. Next thing you know, trying to download it everywhere and so forth. But that app has got some issues. It's been bugged. It has malware on it. It has student data that might be going to the wrong hands. So we pay for that initial membership for schools to participate in that. The best practice in that arena is no signed contract from the vendor, meaning whatever, Microsoft, Adobe, whatever, Magic Plus, what's the school one there, Seesaw. No signed contract, no business. And so that needs to be communicated to staff as well. Not to mention the TikTok craze, which I won't bring up. State of Maine has a digital equity plan that you have access to and a broadband action plan. So right now for my house, we do not have broadband. We believe, meaning the DOE, it's not fair to a student in rural Maine who does not have broadband high-speed access to the internet, while the student in a different part of the state or another place has full high gig down speed. And a lot of that homework, let's say, or access to the information and the learning is an online component. You know, we've all seen, maybe between Jackman and Moosehead, you've tried to use YouTube, but it doesn't work, right? So we think there are some things to go there. There's been a great amount of progress with broadband. You can check out the plan there. Where I live, I have to use Starlink, and I guess Waldo County broadband is coming in line within the next couple of years. That's just a broadband map. NTIA. What is that? And it is specifically the nice edge. You are exactly right. You win the prize. And if you zoom in a little bit, we have some students just kind of walking around on the knife's edge with their laptops, looking for a signal. I use the knife's edge because of that, the pros and cons of technology and what to do, how to maximize it, how to not let it control our lives. We present, we have one at the Maine Principals Conference, a series called Left to Their Own Devices. And what that does is uses the common sense media model. This is our coordinator of that particular program, kind of our expert in common sense media, which is really digital citizenship. This is a hot book out there. I'm sure maybe some of you have already seen it, right? If you've read it already, I've read it a couple times. I'm with it to the most part, especially having grandchildren. I think parentally the biggest mistake I ever made was giving my 6th grader a smartphone. The comparison analysis that came into a young girl's mind at this particular child anyways, it wasn't a positive thing. And we didn't handle it very, very well. So he says, we have overprotected children in the real world and underprotected them in the virtual world. And he talks about a screen-based childhood versus a play-based childhood in the book. It's very interesting. As part of that Left to Their Own Devices presentation, we stand idly by as big tech weaponizes apps and platforms, floods us with dopamine, I'm guilty of this one, manipulates our bodies, elicits irresistible responses, preys on our weaknesses, and shapes our world view. If you are far-leaning right or far-leaning left and you're a Facebook user, you're in the algorithm. When they start feeding you this and feeding you that, and our children are getting the same thing, it's an interesting concept going out there, and I'd like to know more about this algorithm and how this works, and am I making an echo chamber, and are we dividing ourselves even more? And are foreign actors, kind of behind all this, making it happen and watching us sort of eat ourselves from the inside? The dopamine hit is very interesting because at nighttime I listen to in-tune radio with like an earbud, and I'll fall asleep, and sometimes it's 1 a.m. and it's like some guy's talking in my ear, and I'm like, what am I doing? I am addicted to this stuff. It's like, why do I want to check my phone? Why do I scroll? I think my thumb has arthritis in it. So Maine has, this is not a great topic, but Department of Justice contacted us and asked if we could help out with this particular thing, and we really try not to do a fear-based approach to it, but it's it's pretty horrific.
Losing control of your nude images online is terrifying. And if you're a teen, it may feel impossible to reverse it. Well, you can't go back in time and unsend. We can help you move forward.
The climb of sextortion in the state is on the rise, often by foreign countries, like the swatting that happened a couple of years ago, and parents were in a panic mode, hugging their children in front of the schoolhouse steps because of somebody swatting is making a phone call, like there's a shooter in the art room, and it's coming from who knows what country, but it creates our response, it creates the panic, it's terrorism, it's horrible. So there's some sort of line here of the good use of technology, the infrastructure required to protect it all. The legislature, way back when, created Network Maine as the internet service provider, Maine School Library Network. And now we're in a time where hey, how do we protect all that? Because it seems like the access and the potential for issue is exponential all the time. Which is a real quick story. This dog wants a steak, but one time we had some harassment going on when I was a high school principal, and we did a stakeout. So if you can picture an assistant principal, athletic director, and parents are convinced that the school system is at fault for the harassment of my child. And we are, okay, we take that pretty seriously. because there were these horrific, horribly threatening stories and text messages and Instagrams and so on and so forth. So we did a stakeout in the cafeteria one day, and it happened, and we couldn't find the person. But I remembered in a string to the girl, you could look up in the detail of the text or the email where that IP might be. And I saw a particular IP number, and I'm like, oh, I know Network Maine. I wonder if that IP number happens to be in their network management tool. And so I looked it up. It's like, oh, there it is. It's coming from Southern Maine. We went back and looked at kids that had moved from our school within a period of time. Interesting. Well, this one moved down there. You call up that school, you find the IP address, da 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 da, and next thing you know, we had that person that was doing this bad behavior. But I say that just to say, like, this seems to be going on still, but it's like, holy moly! I just wanted to educate kids, and look what we're having to manage. It makes you want to take all this stuff, just throw it out of the school, and like go back to the old way. Personally, kudos to Central Rhonda Sperry up there, and hosted a. You've heard this perhaps in some places, it's picking up cell phone bans and so on and so forth. Of wait till 8th grade or not have cell phones in school. I could argue that in both directions, but these are some of the things that we're doing or supporting to help our plight here. That video was from National Exploited Children's Association. We also go to school districts. I do this one, and we present. We did this in Bangor, called Bangor Safe. What's happening in the world? How is it happening that we get hit by cyber stuff outside of our country? What's going on in the country? What's happening in our state? What's happening at the district level? And then what does that mean to the classroom teacher? So this crossroads or balance, let's say, of which track we're going down for citizenship, for safety, and infrastructure, and the opportunity that creates for our kids. And if you look at some of the stats, this is the reason why. I look at that once in a while to remind myself why I keep doing these things. Because it can help any one of these students and staff in their schools. These are my 10 grandkids. So just like the gentleman before me, vested interest, right? The school life that I want them to go into, I want it to be free of major harm. All right, so CISA came out with a report called Protecting Our Future. It's a K-12 report. It said if K-12 will do these 3 things tomorrow, it will increase its security posture like instantly. And so I went on a quest for the last couple of years to see who is doing these things, who is not doing these things, and how can we find methods to get it done. There's definitely some disparities across the state. It has a lot to do with socioeconomics too. So implementing multi-factor authentication, not sure where you're all at with that. Patch management, when you get that thing like, do you want to update? No, I'll do that later. No, do it right there. And putting the ownership on vendors, on the software person, not like, hey, we put this out, but it's their job to make things safe, not just ours. Perform and test backups, minimize exposure, develop a plan, we talked about that, and create cybersecurity awareness. Which leads us to last year, 2 years ago, we implemented a grant to help school systems that really needed some of the hardware to up their cyber game. We never were the target of attack way back when, and it's increasing significantly. And a lot of that areas that were needs were firewalls and access points, know before training. I'm going to fly through some of these. Which gets us to this, which is a DHS, FEMA through MEMA and OIT grant that's currently going on. If you're not involved, you still can be. The state and local cybersecurity planning grant is another effort to increase our posture from attack surfaces. which has free security awareness training, multi-factor authentication, moving .gov domains for municipalities from, some of them are still .net or .com, much safer to be a .gov. You're covered more with endpoint detection, and then helping them with incident response planning if they don't already have that. And there is a full report on that online, State of Maine Cybersecurity Plan. Within some of the training, we get into the specifics of what's a denial of service attack, what is malware, how to recognize it, what to do when it happens. Sometimes you think you shut it off and restart. That could be the worst thing you could do. Denial of service, and I think it was Saco, Scarborough, or somewhere several years ago. Students do this, they can pay $10 or something and get 1 million hits on a particular web service. So when it's final exam day, you know, they pay this money and it hits this particular computer or IP address. So kids are high stakes. So do this stuff today. Cybersecurity Awareness Month is October. There is, if you download this presentation or if you just go look it up, locals can, they have a kit for everything that you could distribute. So if you wanted to be a champion for keeping your district safe, strong password phrases, meaning like, not like, I used to use like my dog's name and O2 money, and I changed all that. Use a passphrase, not a password. Stop clicking the update later, multi-factor if you're not doing it already, and obviously how to recognize and report issues, phishing issues. We are part of a nationwide collaborative for cybersecurity and privacy. So what I'm talking about could be in any state. You know, this is sort of what's going on in the field. These are the people that we work with. I'm not going to go through all of those, but those are major players in the broadband or internet safety field in the state. And because we're hungry, I have some more, but I'm going to go with this. I'm going to end with this one.
Playing jazz. Playing jazz.
Smoothie.
Making smoothie. Calendar. No meetings today. Remember, dentist at 9:30.
Fire off.
Fire off.
Open door.
Door open.
And we're going to do one more.
Fire. Open door.
Wrong voice command.
Open door.
Wrong voice command.
Open door.
Repeat that.
Open door.
I didn't understand that.
Hey, open door.
Play on the floor.
Get on the floor. Open the door.
Wrong voice command. Error.
Hey there, with a rock. Open door.
No, I'm not getting paid by Rima or whoever that is. All right, so I hit the 12:05 mark. I went fast. Sorry about the glitch with the reboot. Quick questions, or I can do that. You can see me individually, or...
Any questions from folks? I got one.
Yeah.
Since we talked about screen devices and people moving to phone-free schools and stuff like that, how has the thought process around computers just changed overall at the state? Like, I can see the big push in the 80s, 90s, 2000s because people didn't have home computers, but now everyone's connected.
Yeah.
So, do we still need one-to-one devices in school? Do we still need to, or do they have enough tech out there that we don't have to worry about it and move back to reading a book?
Oh, I think there's definitely some issues to consider locally, like how much screen time. So if I had a student going through, let's take a high school example, going through 4 periods a day, does each teacher doing something that's online all 4 periods? You know, what is that stare time? And then they go, hey, a high schooler will go in the bathroom to check their Instagram. You know, there's all kinds of tricks, right? I could make an argument to throw it all away. I think when I retire, I want to take all my technology and drive over with my tractor and then go to my shack in the woods. But that double-edged sword again is success, and you can't escape it. So we could retreat from it, but we can't. Do we want to lead in it? I mean, as we speak right now, there are rooms in particular countries trying to hack into school systems right now. And it's like, wow, how can we let that happen? This is America. How can that possibly happen? Well, because, you know, you used to have maybe let's call it a bad egg in your community. Now you get online and the community is, you know, several billion, right? And they're trying to get to your device. So we have to be the best in it and figure it all out. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I think there is a little bit of that time. I've got some of my kids no devices for their children. Some of them will, you know, wean them into it, and yeah, I'll take the book.
Other questions? Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
So that we would be a 2 or a 3. We had to cut close to $600,000 before the board even approved the budget.
So earlier on in the process is where you make cuts, yeah.
Yeah, and we had 3 different open positions, a world language,
Teaching positions,
music, and what was the other one? I think science at the high school. They were all open, and then we cut all locally funded professional development.
No locally funded professional development.
Yep.
Wow. Anybody else want to share? We'll do one more. What kind of things had to go by the wayside to make your budget?
We had started out with a $1.1 million shortfall with everything together.
Wow.
We ended up cutting 2 or 3 teaching positions. Some of them were retirees and just class size reduction. We ran into an interesting situation where we were asking for $750,000 of additional getting more than what we usually did, and they ended up giving us more than that when all was said and done. But it was quite a budget. It was a 3-hour budget.
Could everybody hear that? So that's the context in which the legislature directed this study. So when you get the electronic version of the handout, that's, does everybody have a handout by now? I hope I have enough to go around. So the legislative resolve that was passed in April directs MEPRE, in conjunction with the Maine Department of Education, to look at certain areas of the essential programs and services funding formula. So first I want to start by just giving you the high-level overview of what it is we've been asked to do. Then I'll want to hear from you. I want to spend some extra time talking specifically about special education. And then we also want to have open Q&A for the kind of things that you feel like should be represented in the report. So the first, for those of you who don't already know, is that MEPRE has 2 ongoing contracts that really comprise our work. So we have a team of 4 or 5 now I think, at USM, and then we have also, I have a co-director who's at the University of Maine. Her name is Janet Fairman, and they have a research associate there. And between the staff on both of our campuses, we do 1 contract a year with the legislature, the education committee, where every year in the spring we have a process for starting with our steering committee and ending up with the legislature, trying to identify the biggest pressing policy questions that they have that they would like us to go research. So every year we have this process. It could be anything under the sun. So they say, MEPRE, can you go do a study? Like last year was a bibliography on what are the impacts of social media use on student mental health. It can be any topic that's bubbling up for legislators. The other contract that we have, which was near and dear to Joanne's heart for a time there, is with the Maine Department of Education, where when the Essential Programs and Services model was implemented back in 2005, there was also a statutory requirement that the model be studied on an ongoing basis. So we, since the very beginning, have been doing annual studies for the Department of Education. I think of it more like kind of technical assistance, where what we're doing is sort of looking at individual components as directed by the state law. There's 3 different buckets. We look at them 1 bucket at a time, then we go back and repeat the cycle. So all of that work we've been doing for 20 years. We have like a pretty big body of work that we build on when thinking about the cost side of the model. What has been much less part of our contracted work to date has been things about the subsidy side of the model and how state aid is allocated. We really try to think about EPS as the 2 halves of the system, where there's the cost model side, that's your 279 that says, here's how much we think your district needs to operate a basic education system. But then all of the, how subsidy is allocated, how you determine community ability to pay, that really didn't even have anything to do with the education committee back when it was developed. It was taxation. So our work has mostly focused on the cost model side. In this work that we're being asked to do this year, it also focuses on the subsidy side. So I'll talk a bit more about that. So it's always a little bit of a finesse to go from a law that gets passed and turning it into a research study. So if you were to look at that resolve and see this handout is how we've translated, with several steps along the way, checking with stakeholders, checking with legislators to make sure that we're hitting the mark. But there's, what I want to start with is just talking about part one. So we weren't asked in any meaningful way to look at like what's happening with public education spending. What are the cost drivers in public education? Like what are some of the problem areas? That wasn't part of our charge. However, we didn't feel like we could really compile this report without having some general background. So part one is stuff that we were not asked to do, but we're doing it anyway because we think it's really important. And it's just trying to capture some of those basic trends, both statewide and county by county, with what's happening with spending, both total and per pupil in certain key areas, and what's been happening with enrollments, and just kind of trying to give that broader context that's, I think, important for understanding how we got to where we are now, based from how things were in 2005 with EPS. Part two is questions that relate to subsidy and state aid, where the ongoing conversations have really been around how property values are used in our system, and keeping in mind that property values are used two ways. The one that's mostly what we're studying is property value, the assumption that we're just gonna have everybody raise the same mill rate, and that's fair. That's not for me to decide what's fair or not, but the underlying assumption that we're gonna have the same mill rate across the state, and that's your ability to pay. So that question of how we use property values to assume community ability to pay and what your local effort should be, that's really the focus of our work. We're going to be doing some analyses, actually mostly done with most of these, around how does property value relate to other measures of community wealth like household income. We're going to be doing things like that. We're revealing some of that data for the first time at the MSMA conference at the end of October. So if you'll be there, please come. We still don't have all the findings, but I'm confident we're going to be there by then. We've got a month left to figure it out. But also in that section, in that analysis, we also want to put together just some basic context and background information about how the subsidy side of the formula works. That's not something that we really spend a lot of time talking about, but even thinking about the fact that at the end of the day, whatever the share is of state versus local in your community, the only real tool in your toolkit is property tax. That's how municipalities raise money. So property value matters in more than way than one in this overall system. It matters because it's how the state determines what they think you should be able to pay, and then it's also how you literally have to pay for your share of the education. So we'll be doing some analysis and just trying to sort of tee up some conversations. In this area, we've been really trying to manage expectations around this work. I think there has been a real hope that this report might come out with some tangible next steps. Here's a way that you can improve how things work. What we already know from what we've been looking at so far is that there are some areas where we don't have the data that we might want to have to really understand all of the different available ways we could be thinking about measuring community wealth. So for example, in order to really understand how it impacts communities, we kind of want to know how much money is being raised in the state from people who aren't Maine residents. We kind of want to know what's the share between commercial and residential property. We don't have information about this. It's not collected at the state level. We'd have to go town by town to get it. So some sort of basic questions that we feel should be fully understood to have an informed policy conversation about who should be paying for public education. We'll be teeing up a lot of basic information, also asking, in our point of view, what we think some of the next step questions might need to be. But this is not an area where MEPRI's going to come out with 4 different model options that the legislators can just choose whichever one they like best and implement. It's going to need more work and more policy conversations and engagement from what we provide. Next is regional something something. My pages are sticking together. We have heard and we have been studying for 20 years how there are challenges with the way that regional cost variation is managed in the EPS formula. So from here on out, parts 3, 4, 5, we're dealing with the cost model side of EPS, the 279s. Part 2 is about the distribution side of subsidy. From here on out, it's really about, it's sort of back in more of our wheelhouse of 279s and cost models. So we have a specific work plan in thinking about and modeling with support from the department some ways that we might think about regional cost variation differently, and different ways that element of the 279 might be implemented, including one of the models that people would like to see is what would happen if we got rid of it. So this is an area where we're not really looking for, high-level feedback on what people are experiencing. We've been studying this for 20 years and we're really ready to get down in the weeds on modeling some potential different options. So this is a pretty technical work plan. There will be a point for stakeholder engagement and feedback on that, but later on in the process after we've gotten some of this preliminary analysis done. And then part 4 is special ed. I'm going to come back to that because we're going to talk a lot about special ed. Part 5 is a laundry list of other things that were named in the resolve that they would like us to study. I'm not going to go through these in big detail, but just know that we have an analytic plan for each of these other elements that's in part 5. And then part 6 is other stakeholder engagement. So again, there was this sort of a finesse to figure out what are the things that we think should be in the study versus what we've been asked to study. What we know is that there might be things that people might like us to do that we don't have the bandwidth to do in the next 5 months. For example, one of the questions that I really wanted to start off with right at the beginning was, what has changed since 2005 and what's considered essential? What has changed and what's considered adequate, right? These are the core pinnings of EPS, and it's supposed to be about having adequate opportunities for and equitable learning opportunities for a basic education. But we know that some things have changed since 2005 that probably need to be revisited. Things like that are not directly in the scope of what we've been asked to do, but we're trying to kind of capture them anyway, because I firmly believe that at some point, these conversations are going to need to converge. Here's where I like to contrast to this report that we're doing right now in Maine to what's happening right now in Vermont. Vermont is right now just embarking on an 18-month legislative commission that's really beginning with big picture questions like, what's the purpose of public education? And what is it we want our public education systems to be accomplishing in terms of skills and abilities for our students? They have questions that they're explicitly looking at. They have like a 9-page list of all of their tasks. For example, who should be in charge of student mental health? Should that be the domain of our education system, or should that really be our health and human services system, perhaps working in collaboration with education? You can see how questions like that would have different funding implications and would have different impacts on what EPS is trying to do based on whether we even think this is a domain of our public education system. So Maine is not taking that approach, but we really think it's important that along the way, we capture things that come up so that at the very least, if there are things that bubble up that weren't part of our charge, we can represent them in our final report as stakeholder input. So the opportunities we have for that, one is there's a public feedback portal on our website. When you get the electronic version, it's memory.maine.edu. You can go in there 10 times a day if you want. You just add in, you can take the form multiple times and submit your thoughts and questions and concerns about EPS. We also are having, as I mentioned, we've been going to regional superintendent meetings. We're doing the conference circuit. We're here today, MADSEC next week, the special ed directors. So we are trying to make sure that we are in touch with some of the key stakeholders who really understand the quirks of EPS. We have also, this week, if you haven't already heard, the department is conducting EPS listening sessions. So I believe there might be 1 or 2 left, although I'm not 100% sure of that. There was a bunch this week. So Dr. Sear at the Department of Ed has been conducting these listening sessions by Zoom to get general feedback from anybody who'd like to participate and provide their thoughts about EPS. She has focused more on some of those questions that I wanted to focus on, about what is essential, what are some of the pain points, some of the big picture questions. So those, I think, will be really helpful in capturing some of the general context and ethos of what districts are experiencing right now in funding. And then we've been doing monthly surveys. They're actually turning out to be more like bi-monthly, but we're doing surveys on more targeted topics to make sure we're getting feedback. And then the last thing is there's a project right now that's not actually in MEPRI, it's in our partner center called CPARE, the Center for Education Policy, Applied Research and Evaluation. That's called Education 2050. And it's community-based conversations that are around what do we think it takes to be successful? What would it look like for our kids to thrive and for our communities to thrive? Trying to get at that underpinnings of why do we invest in public education to begin with. So all of those things are happening as part of this stakeholder engagement and part of being able to hopefully have informed conversations about some of the tough policy decisions and priorities that might need to happen, that will need to happen to change anything about school funding. So first I want to start with questions about, other than special ed, questions about what it is we're studying or not studying, or what you're hoping might come from the work.
Is part of looking at valuation going to be looking at other means to collect valuation? And by example, what I hear from selectmen is it's great that Maine Revenue Services puts in what the valuation is at a state level for each of the towns in the ED 279, but that's not what we're assessing to taxpayers. And so there's a feeling of disconnect between what we're getting subsidy based upon and what they're actually doing for evaluation in the respective town in generating tax bills from. Is there any evaluation going on in MEPRI's analysis of that?
So we're not doing evaluation of specifically the Maine Revenue Service, how do they do equalization, if that's what you mean, like the difference between what your actual tax bill says, your assessed value versus what the state says the value is. We're not, that's not part of our charge. One of the things we do have plans to do, but it's still a little murky, and actually I was hoping after today I might have more clarity, but it might be after the MSMA conference. The Maine Municipal Association is part of our MEPRI steering committee, they're one of our stakeholders. Their conference is next week, and we've missed that opportunity, but we're trying to figure out what's the survey or what's the stakeholder engagement we want to have that's specifically aimed at municipal leaders, and that might be the kind of question that we could ask. So that's, if you could help me remember, Joanne.
Colin will help me remember.
Okay, so like at a certain point we were gonna try to have a survey that we could push out next week, but it became clear that I didn't want to miss the opportunity of asking the right questions, and so I didn't want to force out a survey when I wasn't really clear what all the questions were. But that's an example of what I think we need to hear from municipal leaders about. And that is, I could literally ask them, what proportion of your property value is commercial versus residential versus, homeowners versus part-year residents? I can ask those questions in a survey because the data aren't available. But I'm not directly going to be studying that. What we will be doing as part of our part one general info is some of that the over/under EPS stuff. And also the proportion, I believe we figured out that we can get the proportion of a total municipal budget that can be attributed to education versus other municipal spending. So, I mean, the pain point that taxpayers are feeling is their tax bill. They don't necessarily look at it and think about what proportion of it is education. They just know their tax bill's going up. So we're trying to capture some general context about that, but it's not specifically what you were asking about.
I think, just as a follow-up to that, I think they do that, because at least in my town, I hear from selectmen, and as budgets are getting tighter, it's getting more, because they're saying the school is driving the tax bill. And there are towns there are selectmen that are out there saying that.
Well, honestly, I think that's true in many towns.
And in some cases, it's not though. But that's the narrative that's going out, because now that tax bills are getting tight, now it's who's causing the tax bill to go up? Is it the municipal side or the school side? And I think there needs to be clarity around that, because that is a driver now that maybe 5 years ago wasn't a driver or as big of a driver.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But now that things are getting tight, the other part of the difference between EPS and actual costs for districts over under, I think is critical. The other part, at least for me personally, that's critical is understanding how much of your school budget funding, we all know that 98, 99% of our funding goes to EPS, our local tax dollars. And it would be interesting for each of our school districts in the state to see over the past 10 years, what has that percentage of revenue been for each school district and trend it?
The revenue from the local share?
Well, and by default, also the state share.
Right, but
So,
yeah.
so for my
Well, and
district,
what's
I'll use
different
mine
about that
as
for me is the locals, like we're planning, we have some thoughts about what we're planning to capture on this. And I don't know that we were going to think about it in terms of dollars, but that's something that we can put in the.
I'm not sure it has to be dollars. I think percentage is fine. I think for me, for instance, 10 years ago, approximately 44, 45, 46% of my general fund budget was funded by state subsidy. Today, I'm at 32, 33% over 10 years. I am well under the state average for cost per pupil, and my average cost increases in my district have been less than the state average as well, which is indicative for my district, particularly, and I'm only talking my district, that state subsidy and the formula is not keeping up with the actual cost of educating students in my district.
Well, so there's a couple of things in there I want to unpack. And I know when I speak to business directors, I assume you guys don't need like the remedial, like I don't want to go too far down, but I also do want to unpack this a little bit because I think it could be helpful, especially if some people are here and new. But there's a couple different things that could be going on in an additional district. So the first is on the cost model side, we assume that EPS is adequate for what we say it is, and that it's adequate for meeting a basic education. And so we haven't been asked in this study to say, and I don't want to sound defensive, but it's just not part of what we have the bandwidth to get into, is if that number is way off, that also affects what you're feeling over here, because it's that, your state aid and the amount of subsidy you get is only based on that number. So if EPS isn't adequate for what your school district feels like it needs, anything over or above that is going to be all local. And again, your taxpayers just see that it's for education, if they even can parse education versus everything else. So that's issue one, is EPS working for the model of delivering education in your area. On the other side of it is reasons subsidy could be going down is that your property values are going up so precipitously that compared to the rest of the state, that mill rate is capturing more and more capacity to be taxed based on your land value, and your subsidy will go down. So in many districts, I think both of these things are happening at once. So what we're going to try to do in the analysis is separate some of these issues. So the over-under EPS tells us whether the EPS allocation is, and I don't want to say adequate because what you're spending is maybe a little bit different than what truly might be adequate for what it's supposed to be funding. But if you're way over EPS, and the trends have been that people are more and more and more over EPS, that suggests that EPS itself maybe needs to be capturing more costs. Then how the subsidy is allocated is a separate conversation in what that percent should be. So we have analyses in both of those buckets in the report.
Is income being considered as part of that other side? Because your correct valuation is a large part of that. But again, what I hear in my community is valuation alone is only one factor of many that should be considered in considering what the allocation is of that.
So the specific study that we are doing is understanding how median household income relates to what happens when you use property value as the only measure of community wealth. So we are definitely looking at some of those different measures. But this is again where I will say, one thing we unpacked a little bit when doing that is that the measures that are available for even median household income are not perfect and probably not good enough for actually developing a cost model. So there's additional work that would need to be happening to make more data available, to improve the granularity, all kinds of things before you could actually, it's not at a quality that you could actually build a formula around it. But yes, we are looking at that and we'll have the result. That's the data we'll be presenting at MSNA. You guys ready to go to special ed?
Yes.
Can't wait with our heads. So, okay, so my first question is, everybody knows, I trust that you all have a strong sense of what your special education costs are like. How much do you pay attention to the special ed number on your 279 form? Like, do you have a good sense of whether that allocation is a mismatch for what your actual spending is? Raise your hand if you feel like you can say, you can point to this XYZ part of the model is underfunding me or overfunding. Yeah. So when, for those of you that look at it in that level of detail, where do you think that the special ed funding model is off with meeting what your district actually needs to operate a special ed program? Like, do you actually have a sense of it's underfunding me in XYZ area?
What we're finding now is with the alternative ed plans that we have to have our students saying maybe a student is only in class for a couple of hours a day, a couple days a week. We have to find a way for those transportation costs to catch up with that, because now we have to have a driver who gets a minimum of 2 hours of pay for every run that they make. So if we're adding another run for 2 students, that's not being captured in the model enough. Our out-of-district placements, if we're spending $500,000 in out-of-district placements and we're only receiving, $100,000 for additional funds for that, it's not being used. And those are things that a lot of times are out of our control because those come from federal. So the unfunded mandates sometimes don't cause issues.
So I heard cost of out-of-district placements, and I heard special education transportation. We actually spent a good chunk of our ride up here talking about special education transportation. So FYI, so there is funding for special education transportation, but it's in this transportation element of the EPS model. But I still believe that there is more unpacking that needs to happen in this area because there's some adjustments and things like that that probably need further study. So thank you for raising that. Definitely have been hearing about out-of-district placements every single conversation we're having. Are there other areas where you feel like special ed the model isn't working?
I don't think MaineASBO shows up there anywhere, and that's just a wild card. And I had the state place some kid 50 miles away, so it was a 2-hour run each time. And then they won't pay their third, so, you know.
Yeah, it was funny, I was talking to a local administrator about their McKinney-Vento funding, and he looked at me and said, we don't get funding. Oh, we have to have a person, but we don't actually get real money that comes with a McKinney-Vento program. And I think that's mostly true. Like, there's a little bit of funding here and there, but yeah, that was news to me.
I mean, it's just your total transportation cost. I mean, that's the only way that it's captured it all.
I think one of the things we've seen with SPED is that the reimbursement is kind of, I mean, it's on sort of a reimbursement model in EPS, but it's delayed so that if you're looking at like 2 years ago spending, you're not really getting a picture this year of what you're gonna need for that funding. We've been minimum receivers in and out in my town, so I mean, that's been really important to us.
Mm-hmm.
But the lag, the time lapse between what you're looking at as adequate and what's actually adequate today is problematic.
You're taking good notes, Rachel?
Mm-hmm.
So the general big picture approach, and I've really been preparing this more for, like again, MADSEC is next week, and after that I think as well, we'll have additional stuff. We're probably gonna come back and I imagine to survey it for you guys also in the future. The general approach that we have been, so first of all, the things that we have pointed out as being really problematic in the special ed cost model are, there's at least 3 things. One is those high cost in-district students, like having sort of one weight and the prevalence weight just really doesn't work as special education prevalence rates are increasing and increasing. So that is no longer really a fit for what schools are experiencing. We've also literally the high cost in-district adjustment itself. Not really based in strong data anymore. It just has been not able to keep up with reality. And then the third is what you just mentioned, is the maintenance of effort component that has turned special education into an expenditure-driven model. So that's a real big concern when we talk about equity, because it means that districts that are able to pay for more services do see their allocation go up with a 2-year lag. So we're concerned, and this is again outside our study, but really, really important. The question of adequacy in special education is really, really important right now, because what we hear is that the services that students are getting is not always a fit for what they need in both directions. But there might be cases where there are expenses that are happening because of great advocacy of work that practitioners don't feel like is necessarily needed. We're also seeing placement in expensive programs because of the lack of other options available that might be more appropriate for students. And then we're also seeing students who literally don't have services at all. They're not getting what they need. So the whole general process of, we use expenditure data as a way to model what we think should be, resourced in the cost model. That's really challenging right now, because if your expenditure data is lower than adequate, we don't want to say you only need that much. I mean, you might need more than that. And the flip side is also true. So that's the big picture context that keeps me up at night around special ed, is we have a lot of challenges happening in special ed right now. But the general direction that we want to promote moving forward is that we should stop trying to model in a predictable annual cost model things that are inherently not predictable. So when we have these highly variable costs for when a family with children with intense needs moves into a district, and suddenly you have to pivot and meet that need, and it's not budgeted because it's new and unanticipated, that's not predictable. So we want to kind of go back to thinking about special education costs in really three big buckets, where the first bucket would be a 2-tiered weight system. So instead of having I guess it's always been 2-tier, but there was a base weight and then this prevalence thing, we would go back to 2 tiers of base weights based on whether you have sort of a high incidence, less intense level of need, or whether you're a student that has real severe impairments and disabilities and needs more intense services. So the weight itself that's given for each child would be a little more predictive of your actual the cost that you need, of the services you need to provide. So that's step one. Step two is take certain things that are inherently high cost variable and take them out of the model altogether. Don't try to put them in a base weight, treat them on an expenditure basis. And so that would be things like out of district